Hi guys! Tonight we step straight into a night where the world has been erased by snow, and you are standing in it, boots already damp, eyelashes crusting as the wind scours your face. You blink, and the horizon is gone. The sound is a constant hiss, like the earth itself is being rubbed raw. You probably won't survive this if you treat it casually, and that is not a joke, it is just the tone of the evening. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop your location and local time in the comments, because somewhere out there, someone else is also listening under a blanket. Now dim the lights and keep walking with me as the snow pushes sideways and the night presses close. You trudge forward, shoulders hunched, breath shallow because deep breaths hurt. The blizzard has no direction, it just arrives everywhere at once, filling ears, mouth thoughts. In the 1800s, people called this kind of storm a White Death, not for drama, but because it erased landmarks and distance so completely that you could walk in a circle and swear you were moving straight. One mainstream historical fact settles in as you move. On the Great Plains in the late 19th century, settlers sometimes froze within yards of their homes during blizzards simply because they lost visual reference. That knowledge sits heavy as you scan the ground for anything that dips, anything that offers a break from the wind. Your fingers burn inside stiff gloves, a sharp ache that feels oddly clean. Snow squeaks underfoot, that dry sound that tells you it is bitterly cold. You taste iron at the back of your throat. The idea of sleep feels absurd, yet it is exactly what your body needs. Not deep rest, not comfort, but a pause from exposure. Somewhere beneath the snow is earth, and earth does not move the way air does. That is the quiet logic pulling you downward. You drop to a knee, shielded for half a second, and the relief is immediate. The wind skims overhead instead of straight through you. People in the 1800s learned this quickly. Soldiers on campaign, trappers caught far from cabins, homesteaders whose sod houses were buried all learned that lowering yourself into the ground could mean the difference between waking and not. Historians still argue whether dugouts were chosen primarily for warmth or for speed of construction, but in moments like this the debate feels academic. You just know the wind is weaker down here. You start scraping snow away with your hands, then with anything stiff enough to cut through the crust. A tin plate, the heel of a boot, even a frozen stick. The snow piles up behind you, reforming almost as fast as you clear it. Your movements are clumsy, slowed by layers of clothing that were never designed for finesse. Wool sleeves rasp against each other. There's a smell of damp animal fibre, and your own sweat sharp and uncomfortable. Sweat is dangerous now. You slow down even though panic urges speed. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind, maybe something you heard once in a museum or read half asleep. Some 19th century frontier manuals suggested digging shelters, facing away from prevailing wind's advice. That sounds obvious, until you realise that in a true blizzard, the wind seems to come from everywhere. You pick a direction anyway, mostly by feel, and keep going. The ground beneath the snow is frozen hard like stone that rings faintly when you strike it. Each scrape sends a vibration up your arm. Your knuckles sting. You pause, hands tucked under your arms rocking slightly. The cold creeps in during stillness, a quiet predator. You cannot stop for long. You dig shallow at first, a trench more than a hole, just enough to let your body sink lower than the surface. As you work, you listen. The storm has layers. There is the high hiss of fine snow, the deeper roar of gusts, and underneath it all a strange hollow quiet that feels like pressure. When the wind shifts, you hear nothing for a heartbeat, and that silence is almost worse. People later wrote that blizzards felt alive, as if they watched you. That is not a scientific statement, but it captures something real. Your breath fogs the small space you have made, and you realise you're creating a pocket of slightly warmer air. The idea of sleeping in a dugout during a blizzard sounds primitive, but it is grounded in physics. Earth insulates. Snow insulates too, trapping air. Indigenous groups across cold regions knew this long before European settlers arrived, though settlers often learned it the hard way. There is debate among scholars about how much settlers consciously borrowed from indigenous practices versus reinventing solutions under pressure. Tonight, borrowing or inventing hardly matters. You angle the hollow so you can curl into it. Knees to chest, chin tucked. It is not comfortable, but the wind skims over the opening instead of punching you in the ribs. Your ears ring less. The constant push against your body eases. You feel absurdly grateful to the dirt. You think about how many people in the 1800s faced nights like this without modern forecasts or warnings. Storms arrived with little notice. A clear afternoon could collapse into chaos by dusk. That uncertainty shaped behavior. People learned to read sky as animal movement, even the way sound carried. Some fringe accounts claim that seasoned plainsmen could smell a blizzard hours before it arrived, a metallic tang in the air. Modern meteorologists raise eyebrows at that, but memory has a way of sharpening sensations when survival is at stake. You pull your coat tighter, feeling the fabric stiff with frost. Buttons are clumsy enemies. Your fingers fumble and frustration flares hot and brief. You force yourself to breathe slower. Inhale through the nose, exhale through pursed lips. The rhythm steadies you. Sleep will come later, but first you have to settle. Snow begins to drift back into the hollow, soft and whispering. You brush it away from your face, then let some of it stay along your sides. It feels wrong to invite snow closer, but it blocks the windseal's gaps. People once packed snow deliberately around shelters. For this reason, a counterintuitive trick that saved lives. Historians still argue whether fear of snow burial prevented wider use of this method, or whether people simply trusted what felt safer. Your thoughts slow stretched by cold. Time loses edges. You're aware of your heartbeat, a dull thump in your ears. Each beat is proof. You imagine others long ago curled like this, with the same awareness, the same narrow focus. Social history often talks about communities, about families and towns, but nights like this reduce life to the individual body and the immediate task of staying alive. The wind rises again louder and snow rattles across the surface above you. It sounds like handfuls of sand thrown against wood, though. There is no wood here, just the idea of it. You flinch, then realize the sound is distant. The dugout is already doing its quiet work. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep yet, just to rest them from the white glare. Darkness feels gentler. You tell yourself you will open them again soon. You always do. For now, you breathe curled into the earth, waiting for the night to pass and the story to keep unfolding. The hollow you've made is only a beginning, a pause rather than a solution. And as your breathing steadies, you realize how exposed you still are. Snow sneaks down the back of your collar, in icy threads, melting just enough to chill skin before freezing again. You shift, testing the space, and the ground answers with a dull resistance. This is why people scraped earth when timber vanished under drifts, why the act of digging became instinctive rather than optional. The wind may own the surface, but it loses its authority just a foot or two down. You brace one knee and start scraping again, slower now, more deliberate. Each movement costs energy, and energy is currency tonight. In the 1800s, many settlers on the American plains lived in dugouts, not only during storms but year-round, especially before railroads made lumber affordable. This is a mainstream historical reality that often surprises people who imagine frontier life as log cabins and cheerful hearths. For many, the first home was a hole in the ground roofed with sod and hope. The soil here is stubborn, packed tight by freeze and time. Your tool of choice is still crude, but persistence matters more than elegance. You chip away, levering small chunks loose, tossing them behind you, where they vanish under blowing snow. The smell changes as you reach deeper, a faint mineral scent, cold and clean, mixed with the dampness of old roots. Earth smells like stability. It smells like not moving. You pause again, listening. The sound of the storm feels slightly muted now, as if someone has turned the volume knob a fraction to the left. That subtle shift is encouraging. People learn to read sound underground. A roaring wind meant danger. A muffled rush suggested shelter was working. Historians still debate how consciously people understood these acoustic cues, or whether they simply felt them and adjusted without words. Either way, the body learned. You widen the space enough to roll your shoulders without scraping fabric against frozen walls. The walls themselves begin to take shape, rough but defined. You press a gloved hand against one and feel the difference immediately. It is cold, yes, but not biting. Not alive the way the wind is. Packed earth holds its temperature, stubbornly hovering closer to the average of past days rather than the cruelty of the moment. This is why digging mattered. A quirky detail surfaces in your thoughts. Some 19th century guidebooks warned against digging too deeply because of imagined underground vapours, a leftover fear from earlier centuries when bad air was blamed for illness. Modern scholars smile at this, but those fears influenced how shelters were shaped. Shallow dugouts were common, more burrow than cave balancing warmth with superstition. Tonight you dig just deep enough to feel safer, not enough to trigger old anxieties. Your arms ache, a dull heaviness spreading through muscle. You flex fingers, willing blood to move. Circulation is something you think about constantly now. People sleeping in dugouts learn to shift positions, even while resting tiny movements to keep limbs alive. This was not comfort sleep. It was survival sleep, light and alert like a cat in cold weather. Snow continues to drift into the opening, but less aggressively. You let some of it accumulate along the edge, packing it gently with your forearm. The motion sends a shiver through you, not entirely unpleasant. Snow against earth creates a seal, a barrier of trapped air. This was common knowledge among Arctic cultures long before the 1800s, but settlers on the plains discovered it independently. Historians still argue whether this knowledge spread through observation, shared experience, or sheer necessity, forcing similar solutions. As you dig your thoughts, wander to the social side of this labour. Digging a dugout was rarely a solo task when time allowed. Families worked together, neighbours helped neighbours. During sudden storms, though people were alone, each person reduced to their own strength and choices. Diaries from the era sometimes mention the shame of needing help, or the pride of managing alone. Tonight there is no audience, only the earth. You deepen the hollow just enough to sit upright without your head brushing the opening. That matters later when breathing becomes slower and deeper. A cramped posture makes sleep shallow and restless. You test it, settling back, then forward adjusting angles. The wall crumbles slightly under your weight, grains of frozen soil sprinkling down your sleeve. You brush them away, careful not to dislodge too much. Collapse is a quiet fear. Dugouts could cave in, especially after heavy snow followed by thaw. Historians still argue how common fatal collapses were versus how often they were exaggerated in later retellings. Fear, however, does not need statistics. You stop digging and rest hands tucked under armpits again, shoulders hunched. The ache in your arms pulses in time with your heartbeat. You focus on breathing, on the small cloud forming and fading in front of your face. Condensation freezes on the wall, delicate white feathers that catch what little light there is. You find it strangely beautiful. Outside, the storm shifts pitch, a long moan rising and falling. It sounds farther away, though you know it is not. This illusion of distance is one of the gifts of earth shelter. People sleeping in dugouts often described storms as feeling less personal, less aggressive once underground. That psychological relief mattered. Stress burns calories, calm conserves them. You think about soldiers on winter campaigns in the 1800s, scraping shallow shelters with bayonets and mess tins. Accounts from wars of the era mention men spooned together in holes, taking turns sleeping while others listened for danger. That communal digging and sharing of space blurred lines of rank. In a hole in the ground, everyone was equally cold. Some fringe anecdotes even suggest officers learned humility faster in winter than in battle. Scholars debate how widespread that effect really was. Your own space is solitary, but you imagine others nearby, each in their own hollow, each listening to the same storm. The idea is oddly comforting. You're part of a long, quiet tradition of people who trusted dirt more than air. You brush loose soil from your knees and pull your coat tighter. The dugout's not finished, but it is enough for now. Enough to lower your profile, to dull the wind, to give your body a fighting chance. You lean back against the wall, feeling its solid presence. It does not care about the storm. It does not hurry. That steadiness seeps into you. Your eyelids grow heavy, not with sleep yet, but with the promise of it. Digging has taken the edge off fear, replaced it with fatigue. You know you will need to adjust to build more, but that can wait a little. For now you sit in your scraped shelter, breathing, letting the earth do what it has always done best, and preparing yourself for the next small steps of the night. Your body sinks into the pause after digging, that strange quiet that follows hard effort in the cold. Muscles hum, not painfully, just enough to remind you they are still awake. The dugout is shallow, but it has a shape now, and shape matters. You lean forward again, because stopping completely invites stiffness, and stiffness invites mistakes. This is how labour and urgency shaped every inch of these shelters. Nothing ornamental, nothing wasted. You dig with intention, now carving rather than scraping. Each motion is small and controlled, conserving energy. The soil resists, then yields in brittle flakes. You rotate your shoulders, careful not to strain. People in the 1800s learned quickly that injury in winter could be fatal even without blood. A pulled muscle meant less movement. Less movement meant cold settling in. That knowledge lived in the body more than the mind. As the space grows, you begin to sense proportions. A dugout meant for sleeping during a blizzard did not need standing room. It needed enough length to stretch legs, slightly enough width to turn enough height to keep breath from pooling too heavily. Historians still argue whether standard dimensions existed or whether each shelter was purely improvised. Evidence suggests patterns emerged naturally. Human bodies are similar enough that solutions converged. You angle the floor downward slightly, creating a shallow slope. This is not accidental. Cold air sinks. By letting the lowest point sit near your feet, you keep slightly warmer air closer to your face. This principle appears in multiple cultures and time periods, from European root cellars to steppe dwellings. Whether 19th century settlers articulated the science or simply copied what worked is debated, but the result was the same. Tonight you follow instinct and memory, even if you cannot name the rule. The earth smells stronger as you go deeper, a mix of damp and old vegetation. You catch a faint scent of decay roots that died seasons ago. It is not unpleasant, just grounding. There is comfort in knowing this ground has held through many winters before this one. That thought steadies you. A quirky fragment of history floats up. Some dugouts on the American plains were later criticized by visiting journalists as symbols of backwardness, described with faint disgust. Yet those same journalists often stayed in them during storms, grateful for the warmth. Comfort and reputation rarely align. Historians still debate how much social stigma influenced when families abandoned dugouts for frame houses versus practical factors like access to lumber. You smooth the wall with your forearm pressing loose soil back into place. Compaction matters. A tightly packed wall is less likely to crumble and better at holding warmth. You feel the difference under your sleeve. The wall firms up, responding to pressure like a dense sponge. Snow and soil together form a surprisingly resilient structure. This is why dugouts survived seasons, sometimes years, despite their humble appearance. Your breath slows as you work. There is a rhythm now. Dig, press, breathe, listen. Outside, the storm continues its endless conversation with itself. Inside, the sound is softer, less insistent, It reminds you of being underwater, hearing the world through a thick layer. That analogy appears in several 19th century diaries, people struggling to describe the muffled sensation of earth shelter. Language bends when new experiences arrive. You pause to flex your toes, wiggling them inside boots that feel too tight now. Swelling happens quickly in the cold. You loosen a lace a fraction enough to restore blood flow without sacrificing warmth. These small adjustments were learned through hard experience. Many frostbite injuries came not from exposure alone, but from constricted circulation. This is a mainstream medical understanding now, but in the 1800s, it was discovered painfully one winter at a time. You carve a small recess near your head, a shallow shelf in the wall. This is not strictly necessary, but it feels right. A place to rest a hand, maybe later to set a candle stub or bit of food. Dugouts often included these tiny ledges, evidence that even in emergency shelter, people reached for order. Scholars still argue whether these features were functional or psychological. Probably both. As you deepen the space, the floor becomes uneven, pocked with small stones. You pick them out, setting them aside. Each stone feels colder than the soil, leaching heat if left in contact. The act is meditative. Remove obstacles, make a place for the body. In the 1800s, sleeping surfaces mattered deeply. Even a thin layer of straw or grass could make the difference between rest and shivering wakefulness. You are not there yet, but you are preparing. Your hands grow numb despite gloves. Sensation dulls at the fingertips, movements less precise. You shake them gently, then slap them against your thighs. Pain blooms briefly, then fades. You welcome it. Pain means nerves are still working. This was a common mental check among people wintering in dugouts or snow shelters. Numbness without pain was more worrying. Historians still debate how much folk knowledge of frostbite existed versus how much was learned by observation. You stop digging and sit back evaluating the space. It cradles you now, a shallow bowl carved into frozen ground. Snow has drifted across the opening again, narrowing it further. You leave it for now. A smaller opening means less wind. Oxygen matters, but airflow can be managed later. Dugout sleepers often adjusted openings throughout the night to delicate balance between fresh air and warmth. The storm's sound, pulses sometimes louder, sometimes softer. You begin to recognize patterns. A gust builds peaks, then falls away. In the lull, you hear nothing but your own breathing and the faint creak of soil settling. That creak is new. It makes you tense, then relax. Earth shifts constantly. It is not always a warning. You think of the many hands that dug similar shelters across continents. From Russian zemlyankas to prairie-sod dugouts, the idea repeats. Dig in, get low, let the ground help you. Historians still argue whether these parallels indicate shared cultural memory or simply the universality of cold. Either way, you feel connected, a small link in a long chain of nights like this. Fatigue creeps in heavier now. Your eyelids droop and you have to remind yourself not to sleep yet. There is still more to do, small but important tasks, but the hardest part, the carving, is done. The dugout exists. It is no longer just a hole. It is a place. You run a gloved hand along the wall one last time, feeling its solidity. The earth does not promise comfort, but it offers consistency. You draw your knees up, testing the fit, then extend your legs slightly. It works. The shape holds you. You take a deep breath, slow and careful, and let it out. The air fogs, then clears. In this small carved space you have claimed a margin of safety. The blizzard still rages, but its reach has shortened. You sit there listening, resting and readying yourself for the next adjustments that will turn this dugout from a shelter into a place where sleep might eventually arrive. You lean back into the dugout and feel the walls press close, not threatening, just present. They are rough under your sleeve, grainy with frozen soil, but there is something reassuring about how little they move when you shift your weight. Packed earth has a patience that wood does not. It absorbs it, holds it, waits. People in the 19th century noticed this long before they could explain it, and that quiet lesson shaped how these shelters were built. You begin pressing the walls more deliberately now, using forearms, shoulders, even your boots. The motion is slow and repetitive, almost like kneading dough, though far colder and far less forgiving. Each push firms the surface, locking loose grains into place. Settlers learned quickly that an untouched wall shed heat faster and collapsed more easily. Compaction mattered. Period accounts from prairie homesteads describe families tamping dugout walls daily during winter, not out of obsession, but because it worked. The temperature inside the dugout feels different now, not warm but steadier. The sharp edge of cold has dulled. Earth holds heat longer than exposed materials, and this was one of the practical reasons dugouts remained popular, even when they were mocked by outsiders. Newspapers of the time sometimes ridiculed sod, and earth homes as crude yet winter survival rates quietly told another story. Comfort is not always visible. You press your palm flat against the wall and leave it there for a moment. The cold seeps in slowly, giving your skin time to adjust. That gradual exchange is key. Wood snaps with temperature changes. Earth does not. It buffers. This is why cellars stayed cool in summer and less deadly in winter, why food stores survived underground, why people turned to soil when the weather turned hostile. A lesser-known detail drifts through your thoughts. Some dugouts were intentionally left slightly damp because dry soil crumbled more easily in winter. Moisture helped bind particles together. It sounds counterintuitive, inviting dampness when cold already threatens, but the trade-off often favoured stability. Later observers sometimes misunderstood this and assumed poor hygiene or ignorance. Modern interpretations tend to be kinder, recognising practical adaptation rather than neglect. You smooth a section near your shoulder, noticing how the wall takes on a faint sheen as pressure compacts it. Ice crystals glint briefly in the low light, then disappear as you brush them away. The smell of earth deepens heavier now, like a root cellar. That smell would become familiar to anyone who lived or slept in a dugout. Some later wrote that they missed it after moving into frame houses, a scent tied to survival and memory. You shift position and feel how the wall curves slightly inward at the base. This is intentional, even if you did not plan it consciously. A sloped wall distributes pressure, better resisting collapse when snow piles up above. Builders of permanent dugouts often exaggerated this curve, creating a bowl shape that held firm under surprising weight. Researchers remain divided on whether these shapes were taught directly or evolved through trial and error, but the consistency across regions is striking. Outside, the storm pounds on, but the sound has softened further. The wall absorbs vibration, turning sharp noise into a low murmur. This auditory change matters more than you might expect. People sleeping in dugouts often reported feeling calmer, simply because the storm sounded farther away. Reduced stress meant lower heart rates, slower breathing, less energy burned. In extreme cold, that could be the difference between waking and slipping into dangerous lethargy. You take a moment to adjust your clothing, loosening a belt notch, tugging fabric smooth so it does not bunch and press uncomfortably against skin. Small discomforts grow loud in tight spaces. Dugout living forced people to pay attention to their bodies in a way modern rooms rarely do. There was no ignoring a wrinkle or cold seam when it pressed against you all night. You test the wall again, this time with your back. It holds. There is a sense of being cradled, held upright without effort. That support allows muscles to relax slightly, especially in the lower back and shoulders. Frontier diaries sometimes mention sleeping upright or semi-reclined during storms, a posture that reduced contact with cold floors and kept airways clearer. The idea of lying flat came later, once bedding and flooring improved. An odd belief once circulated that earth walls could somehow draw sickness out of the body, absorbing fevers and pains. It sounds fanciful now, but it hints at something real. People did feel better when sheltered this way. Whether that improvement came from reduced exposure, steadier temperatures, or simple relief is still debated, but the association stuck. You notice condensation beginning to form where your breath meets the wall. Tiny crystals bloom, then melt, then freeze again. You wipe them away with your sleeve. Moisture management becomes important quickly in these spaces. Too much dampness chills, too little loosens the walls. Dugout sleepers learn to monitor this balance instinctively, adjusting openings, brushing walls, shifting positions. Your breathing slows, further deeper now, less ragged. The wall supports you enough that you do not have to brace constantly against the cold. Fatigue spreads, but it feels earned, not dangerous. You're still alert, still listening, but the panic has faded. You glance toward the opening, now partially sealed by drifting snow. Light filters through, faintly a dull glow rather than glare. The wall behind you feels solid, dependable. You trust it not because it is perfect, but because it is consistent. In this small packed space, you understand why Earth became shelter across cultures and centuries. Not because it was romantic or easy, but because it worked. You press your shoulder one last time into the wall, feel it give just enough, then hold steady. The dugout has taken shape around you, and for the moment it is doing exactly what it was meant to do. You tilt your head back and look up at what will soon matter most, the space above you. A dugout without a roof is just a pause, not protection. Snow is patient. It piles, presses, and eventually it wins if you give it time. People in the 19th century understood this well. Even temporary shelters needed something overhead, something to interrupt the slow, crushing weight of winter. You reach behind you for anything rigid enough to span part of the opening. Branches, fence, rails, broken tool handles, whatever survived the storm. In many frontier regions, timber was scarce, which is why sod roofs became so common. Period photographs and homestead records show roofs layered with poles, brush, and thick slabs of grass and soil cut straight from the prairie. They were heavy, yes, but that weight worked in your favour. Heavy roofs stayed put. You arrange what you have across the opening, laying pieces close together so gaps stay small. Each placement is careful. Too much space invites drafts and drifting snow. Too little space risks collapse if the weight cannot distribute. The balance is delicate. People who built dugouts for long-term use learned this through repetition, adjusting after each storm. Temporary shelters like yours rely more on intuition and luck. You press snow and loose soil on top of the makeshift supports, packing it gently at first, then firmer. The motion is slow and methodical, conserving strength. Snow squeaks as it compresses, a dry, chalky sound. That sound tells you the temperature is still well below freezing, which is good for stability. Wet snow is heavier and more dangerous. Cold snow locks together like puzzle pieces. One practical detail from the era often surprises modern listeners. Sod roofs could weigh several tons, yet they rarely collapsed when built correctly. Contemporary engineering studies have confirmed what settlers already knew. Even distribution mattered more than material strength. Spread the load and the earth holds. Get it wrong and even wood snaps. Evidence from surviving dugouts supports this quiet expertise. You pause listening as you add another layer. The sound of the storm dulls again, as if someone has wrapped the world in cloth. This is the moment many people later described as relief. Once the roof went on, fear eased. The shelter felt complete, even if it was crude. That psychological shift mattered as much as the physical barrier. A strange workaround sometimes appeared in emergency situations. Some people deliberately left a small section of roof thinner, a kind of weak spot designed to be pushed out if snow accumulation became dangerous. It sounds risky, but the idea was to control failure rather than be surprised by it. Researchers continue to debate how common this practice was versus how often it appeared only in later storytelling. But the concept reflects careful thinking under pressure. You reinforce the edges of the roof, packing snow tightly where it meets the walls. This seal prevents wind from sneaking in and reduces vibration. The dugout now feels enclosed cave-like, though still breathable. Air seeps through snow, slowly enough to keep you safe if you remain aware. Your arms tremble slightly as fatigue deepens. Roofing takes more effort than digging because every movement reaches overhead. Shoulders burn, neck stiffens. You work in short bursts, resting between layers. Frontier manuals often advise frequent pauses during cold labour to prevent overheating and sweat build-up. That advice was earned through loss. Sweat kills in winter. You test the roof gently from inside, pressing upward with your palm. It holds. Snow dust drifts down, soft and harmless. The structure settles with a faint creak, then goes still. That sound makes your heart jump, then slow again. Earth and snow adjusting. Normal. You think of soldiers who described sleeping under sod roofs while artillery thundered in the distance, trusting the earth to absorb shock as well as cold. In quieter moments, families trusted the same material to shelter children and elders through long winters. The dugout roof carried many meanings: protection, permanence, survival. Another overlooked detail surfaces. Sod roofs were often preferred because they did not reflect moonlight. A dark roof blended into the landscape, reducing visibility. This mattered on contested frontiers and during wartime. A shelter you cannot see is a shelter you cannot target. While your situation is not about hiding from people, the principle still applies. The night swallows your shelter whole. You settle back, looking up at the finished roof. It blocks the stars, but you do not miss them. Darkness feels safer now. The storm's voice is a distant rumble instead of a scream. Snow slides softly across the top weight, spreading pressure even. Your breathing slows further. The space holds warmth better now, not much but enough. The roof completes the dugout, turning a scraped hollow into a true shelter. You're enclosed, supported on all sides by materials that do not hurry or argue with the weather. You rest your head back against the wall and close your eyes briefly just to feel the difference. The cold still exists, but it no longer dominates. The roof above you listens to the storm so you do not have to. And in that quiet, you prepare for the next small challenges of the night, knowing that the hardest part exposure has finally been eased. You shift closer to the opening and study it the way someone studies a problem that cannot be fully solved, only managed. A doorway in a dugout is never really a door. It is a negotiation with wind, with heat, with the need to breathe. Too open, and the storm finds you. Too sealed, and the air turns stale, heavy, dangerous. People in the 19th century learned this balance through long nights and close calls. You begin shaping the entrance so it bends slightly rather than opening straight in. A straight line invites drafts. A curve confuses them. Even a small dogleg in the opening forces wind to lose momentum. This principle shows up in everything from traditional earth lodges to later military trenches. Field reports from winter campaigns noted fewer cold injuries in shelters, with angled entrances a practical observation passed along without much theory attached. You scrape away a little more earth, deepening the threshold just enough that you can step down into the dugout rather than slide in. That step matters. Cold air sinks, and by lowering the entrance floor you create a trap where colder air settles, away from where you will breathe. Root cellars and ice houses use the same idea. It is simple physics, but it was learned by generations before it was named. You pack snow along the sides of the entrance, shaping it with your forearms until it feels solid. Snow here is not an enemy. It is a tool. Packed tightly, it blocks wind better than loose soil. Many settlers initially distrusted snow, seeing it only as a threat, but experience changed that view. Diaries from prairie winters mention deliberately banking snow against homes, even piling it higher after storms to improve insulation. A curious habit appears in some accounts. People sometimes hung a blanket coat or even a feed sack across the entrance weighted at the bottom. This flexible barrier moved with air rather than fighting it, reducing drafts while still allowing airflow. Modern outdoor survival guides echo this advice, almost word for word, proof that some lessons stick. You test the entrance by leaning back and listening. The wind sounds different now. Instead of rushing straight in, it skims past its force broken. A faint whisper reaches you, but it no longer claws. That change is subtle, but deeply felt. Your shoulders drop, a fraction tension easing. You adjust the opening again, narrowing it slightly with a final push of snow. You leave a gap just large enough to refresh the air slowly. Dugout sleepers often check this opening repeatedly through the night, responding to shifts in wind and temperature. Some even marked the position of snowbanks outside so they could tell if drifting was closing the entrance completely. Suffocation was rare, but the fear of it was real. Your breath fogs near the entrance, then drifts upward and out. You watch it for a moment, reassured. Air is moving. You are not sealed in. This quiet monitoring becomes part of the routine, like checking a fire or listening for changes in weather. The dugout demands attention, but it gives back safety. You think about how entrances reflected social life too. In permanent dugouts, the doorway became a threshold of sorts, a place to knock snow from boots to paws before entering the shared space. During storms, that boundary mattered even more. It separated chaos from calm. Scholars continue to differ on how much these physical boundaries shaped emotional life, but personal writings suggest they mattered a great deal. Another small detail surfaces. Some people oriented entrances toward the east, believing it reduced snow buildup or brought better luck. Practical benefits likely varied, but belief itself provided comfort. In harsh environments, confidence can be as important as technique. You do not worry about direction now, you worry about feel. And the entrance feels right. You pull your legs in and settle back against the wall, testing the draft one last time. A cool thread of air brushes your cheek, then fades. It is enough. Not too much, not too little. The dugout breathes with you, slow and steady. The storm continues outside, relentless but less personal. Inside, the space feels contained, manageable. The entrance no longer feels like a weakness, but a controlled opening, something you understand. That understanding brings a sense of calm deeper than warmth. You tuck your chin, adjust your coat collar, and let your eyes rest half closed. The dugout is now complete enough to hold you through the worst of the night. The walls support the roof shields, and the entrance negotiates with the storm on your behalf. With that balance struck, your body begins to shift from vigilance toward rest, ready for the quieter rhythms that come next. You sit still for a moment, letting the dugout settle around you, and notice how dark it has become. Not the sharp outdoor darkness full of glare and reflection, but a softer one, dense and close. Light behaves differently underground. It does not scatter the same way. It stays where you put it, and that makes it precious. In the 1800s, light at night was never casual. It was measured, rationed, and treated with respect, especially in winter. You reach slowly into a pocket, careful with numb fingers, and feel the small object you saved for this moment. A stub of candle, maybe tallow, maybe beeswax if you were lucky. Most people were not. Animal fat was common, rendered at home smoky and imperfect. Period household inventories show candles listed alongside flour and salt as essentials, not comforts. In storms, they were lifelines. You shield the flame as you strike it, turning your body so the entrance blocks any sudden draft. The wick catches reluctantly, sputtering, then steadies. The light is weak yellow, but it feels almost luxurious. It paints the packed walls in warm tones, softening their roughness. Shadows ripple as your hand moves, giving the space depth. The dugout feels less like a hole, now more like a room. You keep the candle low close to the wall where heat will not rise straight to the roof. Fire management mattered deeply in dugouts. Without chimneys, flame had to be controlled with discipline. Many people avoided open fire altogether in these spaces, relying instead on body heat and insulation. Others used tiny lamps, watching them constantly. Winter letters from the period mention the fear of falling asleep with a flame burning balanced against the fear of total darkness. A strange habit appears in some accounts. People sometimes placed reflective objects near a candle, bits of tin or polished bone, to amplify light without increasing flame size. It sounds clever, and it was, Even a slight increase in visibility could help with tasks or simply calm the mind. Modern lighting makes this seem quaint, but in a dugout every lumen counted. You adjust the candle so it sits in the small recess you carved earlier. The ledge feels justified now. Melted tallow drips slowly thick and pale, pooling against the earth. The smell is faint but distinct, fatty and slightly sweet. It mixes with the scent of soil, creating an aroma many later described as the smell of winter shelter. Some found it comforting, others never forgot it even decades later. You watch how the flame behaves. It leans slightly, then straightens. That tells you air is moving gently through the entrance. Good. Too much movement would make it flicker wildly. Too little would starve it. People learned to read flames the way sailors read water small signals that told larger stories. Letters from frontier winters often mention watching candle behavior to judge safety through the night. The light reveals details you could not see before. The curve of the walls, the uneven floor, your own breath fogging and clearing. Condensation glistens briefly, then fades. You wipe a spot where moisture gathers near your shoulder. Dampness steals heat. Dugout sleepers developed a habit of brushing walls periodically, even half asleep, to keep surfaces dry. Some remembered doing it without fully waking muscle memory taking over. You resist the urge to keep the candle burning longer than necessary. Fuel is limited. Darkness once accepted uses nothing. This was a lesson repeated often in winter life. You light the candle to check, to adjust to reassure, then you let it go. Many diaries describe the moment of extinguishing light as both a relief and a small act of courage. Before you blow it out, you take one last look around. The space holds. Nothing threatens. The roof is solid. The entrance breathes. You nod to yourself a quiet acknowledgement that you have done what you can. That sense of completion matters. It allows the mind to release its grip slightly. You pinch the flame carefully. Smoke curls upward thin and grey, then dissipates slowly into the air. You wait, counting breaths, making sure it clears. In enclosed spaces, patience after extinguishing flame was essential. People learned to sit quietly, listening, smelling, ensuring the air remained clean. Mistakes here were unforgiving. Darkness returns, but it feels different now. Familiar. You know the shape of the space. You know where your body fits. The dugout does not disappear when the light goes out. It stays present through touch and sound. You shift your weight and feel the walls support you. Outside the storm continues, but its voice is distant, filtered. Inside the quiet has texture. You hear your clothing rustle softly. You hear the faint crackle of snow settling on the roof. You hear your own breathing, slower, now deeper. There is a moment common in nights like this when imagination tries to fill the dark. Shapes seem to move. Sounds seem closer than they are. People wrote about this often, how the mind wandered when sight was limited. Some blamed spirits or animals. Others simply accepted it as the brain passing time. Accounts differ on how unsettling this was. Some found it frightening. Others found it strangely peaceful. You let the darkness be what it is. There's no need to fight it. Light has done its job. Now rest begins in earnest. You tuck your hands closer to your body, preserving warmth. The absence of light encourages stillness. Muscles loosen. Thoughts stretch out, less sharp. In the 1800s, nights were long in winter. People adapted by sleeping in fragments, waking briefly, then drifting again. This pattern suited dugout life well. You do not expect a single deep sleep. You expect waves. That expectation removes pressure. You're not failing if you wake. You're surviving. You breathe in the scent of earth and cool tallow. It anchors you. You feel the dugout holding steady, unchanged by your stillness. The light is gone, but safety remains. With that knowledge settling in your body eases further toward rest, ready to ride the night in small, manageable pieces. You shift your weight again and feel the floor beneath you more clearly, now that the digging and building have slowed. Bare earth is honest. It gives nothing for free. Cold seeps upward without apology, and if you let your body rest directly against it for too long, it will steal warmth steadily and without drama. People learn this early, sometimes too late. Sleeping arrangements in dugouts were never an afterthought. They were the difference between enduring the night and fighting it every minute. You reach for what you have gathered. Straw first, brittle and sharp smelling, tucked into a sack or bundled against your side. It rustles softly as you spread it out, the sound dry and comforting. Straw traps air, and trapped air means insulation. Agricultural records from the 19th century show straw valued almost as much for bedding as for feed in winter months. It served animals and people alike, often in the same space. You layer it thickest where your hips and shoulders will rest. Pressure points lose heat fastest. Dugout sleepers knew this instinctively. Some added grasses, others used dried leaves, anything that created loft. You press down with your palm and feel the spring slight but present. It is not softness exactly, but it is separation from the ground, and that matters. Over the straw you spread a hide or a heavy coat stiff with age and cold. Animal skins were common bedding materials well into the late 1800s, especially in frontier regions where manufactured blankets were scarce or expensive. Fur trapped warmth effectively, but it came with smells and maintenance challenges. People accepted that trade-off without much complaint. Warmth outranked comfort. You smooth the surface, arranging layers so there are no gaps where earth peeks through. A small exposed patch can draw heat like a drain. People who slept this way learned to feel for cold spots with their hands before settling fully. This quiet inspection became routine, almost ritual. A just smooth test, then commit. An odd practice appears in some personal writings. A few people sprinkled dried herbs or cedar shavings into bedding, believing it repelled illness or bad dreams. Whether it did either is unclear, but the scent likely offered comfort. Smell anchors the mind. In tight spaces, familiar aromas can ease tension. Accounts vary on how widespread this habit was, but it appears often enough to be more than coincidence. You lower yourself carefully onto the bedding, testing it with the knee first. The straw compresses, then holds. You shift again, settling your weight. The difference is immediate. The cold from below dulls, slowed by layers of trapped air. Your muscles relax a fraction more. This is as close to luxury as the night will offer. You pull another coat or blanket over your legs, tucking the edges around your calves. Heat escapes downward easily. People in dugouts often slept fully dressed boots on hats pulled low. Clothing was not just attire, it was architecture. Layers replaced walls. Wool in particular played a crucial role. Sheep thrived where crops struggled, and wool retained warmth even when damp. That quality saved lives. You wiggle your toes, checking circulation. They feel cool but responsive. Good enough. You flex your fingers inside sleeves, then tuck your hands against your torso. The bedding cradles you, now shaping itself to your body. You adjust once more, small movements, seeking that narrow zone where warmth stabilizes. You notice how sound changes when you settle. The rustle of straw fades. The dugout grows quieter, as if acknowledging that movement has slowed. Outside, the storm continues, but it feels less relevant. Inside, the immediate world is reduced to breath heartbeat and the faint crackle of settling snow above. Some later commentators assumed people in dugouts slept poorly, plagued by discomfort and fear. Personal accounts complicate that picture. Many describe a deep, heavy sleep born of exhaustion and relative safety. Others mention waking often but returning to rest easily. Experiences differed, conditions varied. What remains consistent is the importance of preparation. Bedding was not optional, it was essential. You turn slightly onto your side, then back again, testing positions. Side sleeping conserves warmth but constrains shoulders. Semi-reclined allows easier breathing. You choose a compromise, knees bent back, supported by the wall. Your body remembers older shapes, older ways of resting that modern furniture has trained out of you. As you settle, the scent of straw and earth surrounds you. It is dry, organic grounding. Your breathing slows, syncing with the stillness of the space. The dugout feels smaller now, not because it has changed, but because you have filled it with intention. Every layer serves a purpose. Nothing is wasted. You pull the last edge of fabric up toward your chest and tuck your chin slightly. The bedding holds. The cold remains, but it has been negotiated, slowed, redirected. You're no longer fighting the ground. You're floating above it just enough. With that, your body begins to release its grip. Muscles soften. Thoughts stretch out and thin. You're not asleep yet, but you're close to the edge, the place where vigilance gives way to rhythm. The dugout has become a nest of sorts, rough and imperfect, but capable of holding you through the long hours ahead. You lie there for a moment wrapped in layers and realize that sleep here is never naked. Inner dugout clothing is not something you remove at the end of the day. It is something you adjust and rely on the way you rely on walls and roofs. You stay dressed because fabric is structure. It traps heat, blocks drafts, and creates a personal climate your body can survive inside. You tug your wool shirt lower, smoothing it over your waist so it does not bunch. Wool scratches slightly, even through an undershirt, but you welcome it. That itch is proof of contact proof that fibres are doing their work. People in the 19th century trusted wool more than almost anything else in winter. Shipping records and store ledgers from cold regions show wool garments listed as necessities, alongside tools and food, not fashion. You pull on another layer at your core, maybe a vest or a second shirt, and feel your breathing adjust to the pressure. Snug, not tight. Tight constricts blood flow. Loose leaks warmth. Dugout sleepers learn this balance the same way they learned everything else, through sensation rather than theory. You move until it feels right, then stop. Your legs are wrapped in thick trousers patched at the knees, stiff with use. You keep them on, even though sleeping fully dressed feels strange by modern standards. In winter, shelters and dressing invited danger. Body heat drops quickly when layers come off, and putting cold clothing back on in the night could be agonizing. Many personal journals from the era mention sleeping in day clothes for weeks during harsh weather, saving the act of undressing for warmer seasons. You pull your hat lower, covering ears and forehead. Heat escapes fastest from the head. This was widely understood long before modern physiology explained it. Some people even tied scarves across their faces while sleeping, leaving only a narrow gap to breathe. It looked odd, but it worked. Warm breath circulated close to the skin instead of vanishing into cold air. An unusual practice surfaces in a few accounts. Some people stuff spare socks or rags between layers at the chest or lower back, creating improvised insulation pockets. It sounds awkward, but it helped fill gaps where cold crept in. These small hacks rarely appear in formal descriptions, but they show up in letters and recollections, the quiet tricks that never made it into manuals. You flex your ankles again, then relax them. Blood moves. Good. You tuck your feet deeper into the bedding, pressing them against straw and fabric rather than earth. Foot warmth matters disproportionately. Cold feet make the whole body restless. Dugout sleepers often spend extra time insulating this area, sometimes wrapping feet separately in scarves or spare sleeves. You adjust your sleeves, pulling them over your hands, then tucking your fingers under your arms. This posture conserves heat effectively, though it limits movement. That is fine. Movement is less important now. You're transitioning from action to endurance. Some later observers claim that people in dugouts grew careless about hygiene or appearance because of constant layering. That judgment misses the point. Clothing here is not about looking presentable. It is about survival. Cleanliness becomes secondary to warmth. People washed when they could, but they didn't sacrifice insulation for comfort or vanity. Interpretations differ on how this affected health, but the immediate benefit of staying warm is undeniable. You feel the fabric warm, slowly responding to your body heat. Wool holds warmth even when slightly damp, unlike cotton. This property made it invaluable in winter shelters where condensation was unavoidable. Modern outdoor clothing mimics this behaviour, but in the 1800s people relied on animal fibres and experience rather than branding. You listen to the faint rustle of your clothing as you shift one last time. The sound is soft, reassuring. Everything is in place. The layers create a cocoon, a wearable shelter inside the larger one. You're insulated within insulation. Your breathing evens out deeper, now less forced. The dugout holds steady. The roof does not creak. The entrance breathes quietly. Outside, the storm continues its work, but inside you are wrapped in fabric and intention. There is a sense of surrender here, not to the cold, but to the process. You have done what people before you learned to do. Layer, cover, protect circulation. Trust materials that have proven themselves over generations. Whether this knowledge came from tradition, observation, or necessity remains open to interpretation, but its effectiveness is clear in moments like this. You close your eyes fully now, not expecting perfect sleep, just rest. The clothing presses gently against you, a constant reminder that you're not exposed. Your body settles into its insulated shell heat, stabilizing thoughts, slowing. In this layered stillness, you drift closer to sleep, knowing that if you wake later, cold will not rush in immediately. The clothing will hold, the dugout will hold. For now, that is enough. You become aware of your breathing before anything else. Each inhale draws cold air in, each exhale releases something warmer, heavier. In a space, this small breath becomes visible, tangible. Moisture blooms in front of your face, then drifts upward, brushing the roof before fading. This quiet exchange happens over and over, a rhythm you cannot escape, only manage. People who slept in dugouts quickly learned that breath was both friend and threat. Warm air kept you alive. Moisture could undo that warmth if left unchecked. Winter journals from the 19th century often mention waking to find frost-lining walls and ceilings shaped like feathers or lace. It looked beautiful, they said, but beauty could turn dangerous if it melted and soaked clothing or bedding. You watch condensation gather where your breath meets the cooler wall. Tiny crystals form, then soften, then harden again. You wipe the spot gently with your sleeve, careful not to scrape too hard. This small act becomes routine. Brush, breathe, wait. Dugout sleepers did this without thinking, even half asleep. Let moisture build up and the shelter grows colder. Manage it and the space stays livable. You adjust your posture slightly so your breath rises toward the entrance rather than pooling near your face. Even this small change helps. Airflow is subtle here. It moves slowly, guided by temperature and shape rather than wind. People did not need diagrams to understand this. They felt it. Cold air clung low. Warm air lifted. You position yourself accordingly. There is a quiet intimacy to sharing space with your own breath. In the darkness, it becomes a companion, steady and predictable. You count a few cycles, not on purpose, just because the mind does that when it slows. In, out. In, out. Each breath confirms that the dugout is working. Some accounts mention a faint sweetness in the air after hours underground, especially when candles or oil lamps had been used earlier. The source was not always clear. Rendered fat, damp soil, human presence all mixing together. Some people believed the smell meant the shelter was safe settled. Others worried it signaled bad air. Memories conflict here and descriptions vary widely. You sniff the air now. It smells earthy, faintly woolen, touched by cool tallow from earlier. Nothing sharp, nothing heavy. You relax a little more. In winter shelters, the nose often noticed danger before the mind did. Stale air feels different. It presses. This air moves slowly but surely. You feel moisture collecting in your moustache or along your upper lip, freezing slightly. It is uncomfortable, but you leave it alone. Scraping ice from skin can irritate and crack it. People learn to tolerate small discomforts rather than create larger problems. Frosted breath on hair and fabric was common, almost expected. You wipe only when it threatens to drip. You shift your shoulders and a faint dusting of frost shakes loose from the wall behind you. It lands silently on your coat. You brush it away. This happens again later, and again. Each time you handle it without urgency. Panic wastes energy. Calm preserves it. Long-term dugout dwellers sometimes mentioned how breath patterns changed over the winter. People breathe shallower, slower, conserving heat. Whether this was learned behavior or unconscious adaptation is unclear, but the descriptions repeat. You notice your own breaths lengthening, now stretching out between inhales. The body knows what to do when given the chance. You listen to the sound of breathing inside fabric and earth. It is muted, almost padded. Outside the storm still howls, but here the dominant sound is you. That awareness can feel strange at first, even unsettling. Some people wrote that it made them feel too alone. Others found it grounding proof of presence. You rest a hand on your chest and feel the rise and fall. The motion is steady, no rush, no struggle. The dugout allows this pace. Without it, you would still be fighting the wind-gulping air-burning energy. This small carved space has changed the entire conversation between your body and the night. A few winter letters mention people humming softly to themselves while lying in dugouts, not to pass time but to keep breath moving and minds calm. You do not hum now, but the idea lingers. Breath, sound, rhythm, they blend together. Condensation gathers again near the roof. You let it be for a moment, then brush it lightly with the back of your glove. The crystals fall like dust, harmless. You adjust your position one last time, ensuring air still flows gently toward the entrance. With that you settle. Breathing becomes something that happens without attention. The dugout breathes with you, exchanging warmth and moisture at a pace you can live with. The night stretches on, but it no longer feels hostile, it feels manageable. Your eyes stay closed now. Thoughts drift without urgency. The simple act of breathing steady and supported carries you closer to sleep, one quiet exchange at a time. You lie still and let your ears take over. In a dugout, sound becomes a kind of early warning system, a way to measure safety without moving. The storm above you never fully stops, but it changes character, and those changes matter. Wind can scream, whisper, rattle, or sigh, and each version tells you something different about what the night is doing. Right now, the sound is broad and even a steady rush rather than sharp strikes. Snow slides across the roof in soft sheets, making a faint shh sound that comes and goes. This tells you the wind is moving fast but not directly downward. When snow hammers straight down, it means gusts are dropping from above, increasing the weight on the roof quickly. You listen for that, ready to react if the sound changes. People who slept through blizzards learned to identify danger by ear long before they could see it. Winter accounts from the 1800s often describe listening for sudden silence as much as noise. A deep quiet could mean snow had packed so tightly around a shelter that air movement slowed. That silence made experienced sleepers uneasy. Sound, even unpleasant sound, meant exchange. It meant breathing. You tilt your head slightly, adjusting how your ear meets the wall. The earth carries vibration differently than air. Low sounds travel through it as a gentle thrum. You feel it now, a distant pulse when strong gusts pass overhead. It is not threatening yet, just information. Every so often, something taps lightly against the roof. A clump of snow breaking free, maybe a branch carried by wind, maybe just ice shifting. You do not jump. Startling burns energy and teaches nothing. Dugout sleepers learn to catalogue sounds rather than react to them. Unknown noise became familiar once it repeated. There is a faint whistle at the entrance, soft and intermittent. That tells you air is still moving through the gap you left. Good. If the whistle deepened or stopped entirely, you would need to adjust. Many people checked entrances several times a night during heavy storms, not out of fear but habit. Listening often came first. Some recollections mention people tapping the roof gently with a stick from inside just to feel resistance and hear the response. A solid thud reassured. A hollow sound invited caution. Whether this practice was widespread is hard to pin down, but the idea appears in enough stories to feel familiar. You resist the urge to test now. Everything sounds right. You focus on the rhythm of the storm. Gust builds, gust fades. In between there is a low constant hiss. That baseline tells you the blizzard is still strong but stable. Rapid changes would worry you more. Stability, even harsh stability, is easier to manage. You remember that people once measured storm strength by how it sounded against sod roofs versus wooden ones. Earth absorbed noise. Wood amplified it. Dugout sleepers often commented on how storms felt less violent underground even when damage occurred above. This difference affected nerves as much as ears. Reduced noise meant better rest, which meant better decisions come morning. Your own breathing blends into the soundscape now. Inhale, barely audible. Exhale, brushing fabric. The combined effect is oddly soothing. It reminds you of being inside a moving train or beneath heavy rain situations, where noise surrounds you but cannot reach you. Every so often the roof creaks faintly as weight shifts. Not a crack, not a snap, just a settling sound. Snow redistributing itself. Earth adjusting. You acknowledge it, then let it go. Panic serves no one here. Later readers sometimes imagine dugouts as claustrophobic oppressive spaces filled with fear. Personal descriptions paint a more complex picture. Many people reported feeling oddly protected once underground, even while storms raged. The earth muffled not just sound, but worry. That does not mean fear vanished. It simply became quieter. You notice how the absence of sharp noise allows thoughts to slow. Without sudden bangs or howls, the mind drifts more easily. You follow the sound of wind as if it were waves rising and falling. Each cycle carries you further from alertness and closer to rest. A sudden, stronger gust roars overhead louder than the others. You tense briefly, then listen closely. The sound spreads, then fades without changing shape. No collapse, no cracking. The roof holds, you relax again. This small test reinforces trust in the shelter. You adjust your head, slightly settling into a position where the wall supports your neck. The sound becomes even more muted. The dugout feels like a cocoon, thick and insulating, not just against cold, but against chaos. As minutes pass, the storm's voice becomes background rather than focus. You stop analysing each sound. That shift matters. It means your body believes the shelter is adequate. Vigilance eases naturally when danger feels contained. Your eyes remain closed now. The dugout listens for you. If something changes, sound will tell you. Until then, the steady hush of snow and wind becomes a lullaby of sorts, carrying you gently toward deeper rest, while the blizzard spends itself above. Hunger arrives quietly, not as a sharp pain, but as a gentle reminder somewhere low in your body. It is easy to forget about food when cold dominates attention, yet people who endured winter storms learned that eating mattered even when appetite faded. Calories were fuel. Fuel meant heat. Skipping food to save supplies often backfired, leaving bodies weaker and colder through the night. You reach for the small portion you set aside earlier. Hard bread, dense and dry, wrapped carefully to keep it from snow and damp. It smells faintly of grain and age. This kind of bread was common across much of the 19th century, baked to last rather than to please. Military rations, frontier pantries and travel packs all relied on versions of it, because it endured cold without spoiling. You break off a piece with your fingers. It resists, then snaps with a dull sound. You chew slowly, letting saliva do most of the work. The texture is unforgiving but familiar. People often wrote that hard bread tasted better in winter, simply because it meant survival. Taste adjusted to circumstance. Alongside it may be a strip of salt meat, stiff and pale in the cold. Salt pork or beef was a staple for winter travel and sheltering because it stored well and delivered fat which the body burns efficiently for heat. Contemporary household records list salted meat as a core winter provision, not an occasional one. Fresh food was rare once storms set in. You take a small bite and let it warm in your mouth before chewing. Fat coats your tongue heavy and reassuring. The flavour is simple, almost blunt, but it settles something inside you. You do not eat much, just enough. Overeating makes the body sluggish and can draw blood away from extremities. People learned moderation the hard way. Some accounts mention a curious habit of saving the fattiest bite for last, believing it helped retain warmth longer. Whether that belief had a physiological basis or was simply comforting is unclear, but the practice appears often enough to feel deliberate. You do the same without thinking, ending on a richer mouthful. You swallow and feel warmth spread, subtle but real. Digestion generates heat. This was well understood in practice, if not in science. Winter routines often included a small meal before sleep, even when supplies were low. Skipping it invited chills later. You wipe your fingers on a scrap of cloth, careful to keep grease off bedding. Cleanliness here is about function, not appearance. Greasy fabric attracts dirt and holds moisture, which steals warmth. People learned to be meticulous about small things in winter shelters, even when everything else felt crude. You stow the remaining food within reach, not buried away. If you wake later cold and restless, a small bite can help. Diaries from long winters mention midnight eating as common, especially among those sleeping in earth shelters. Hunger did not follow clocks, it followed need. The smell of food lingers faintly, mixing with wool and earth. It is comforting human. In dugouts shared by families or groups, mealtime was often the warmest social moment of the day, even if it lasted only minutes. Conversation slowed chewing. Quiet stretched the meal. Tonight you eat alone, but the ritual still grounds you. You drink a careful sip from your container, just enough to wet your mouth. Cold suppresses thirst, but dehydration worsens cold stress. People knew this from experience, even if they lacked the language for it. Winter illnesses often followed long periods without proper water intake. The food settles, your stomach warms, muscles relax another fraction. The simple act of eating marks a transition from preparation to endurance. You have fueled yourself for the long hours ahead. You tuck the food away and settle back into position, hands returning to their warm place against your body. The dugout feels quieter now, not because the storm has changed, but because you have met another need. Hunger fades into the background. With that, your thoughts slow again. The night stretches, but you're no longer empty. You're sheltered, layered, fed. These small victories add up. They carry you gently toward rest, one careful choice at a time. Your mouth still tastes faintly of salt and grain as thirst finally makes itself known. It is not dramatic, just a dryness along the tongue, a reminder that cold tricks the body into forgetting its need for water. In winter, shelter's thirst often arrived late, and when it did, it mattered. People learned that ignoring it led to headaches, weakness, and a deeper chill that no amount of layering could fix. You reach for your container, carefully mindful of sound and movement. Water sloshes thickly inside, heavier than it should be. Cold has already begun to change it. In the 19th century, water storage during winter was a constant challenge. Wells froze. Barrels iced over. Travellers carried canteens inside coats to keep them liquid. Many learned to sleep with water tucked against the body, sharing warmth the same way you do now. You tip the container, slightly checking. A thin crust of ice has formed along the rim. You press it gently with a finger and feel it give. Good. You break it away and bring the opening to your lips. The water is painfully cold at first, sending a sharp sensation through teeth and jaw. You take only a small sip, letting it warm before swallowing. Gulps shock the system. Sips sustain it. You pause between drinks, breathing slowly. The water spreads warmth in an unexpected way, not heat exactly, but balance. Your body relaxes, no longer signaling need. Winter accounts often mention how easy it was to forget to drink, especially at night, and how grateful people felt when they remembered. Dehydration crept in quietly, then made everything harder. Some people preferred melted snow to stored water, believing it tasted cleaner or felt lighter. Others avoided it unless necessary, claiming it chilled the body more deeply. Memories differ on this point, and advice varied from place to place. You choose what you have. Consistency matters more than theory. You seal the container and tuck it back into a fold of clothing near your chest where it will stay liquid longer. This habit appears again and again in personal writings. Water slept close. It was guarded like food or fire. Losing it to ice meant trouble come morning. You swallow once more, feeling the last sip settle. The dryness fades, your breathing deepens. Small needs met, the body eases. You are learning the rhythm of the night now. Listen, adjust, rest, wake briefly, adjust again. The dugout feels slightly damper after drinking breath, adding moisture to the air. You wipe the wall near your shoulder again, brushing away fresh crystals. This quiet maintenance continues without effort. It has become part of resting, like turning over in bed. You think of people who spent entire winters in dugouts managing water daily. Ice was hauled, melted, rationed. Snow was collected and boiled when fuel allowed. Children learned early not to waste a drop. These routines shaped winter life as much as shelter itself. An odd practice appears in a few recollections. Some claimed that holding a smooth stone in the mouth while sleeping reduced thirst. Whether it worked or simply distracted the mind is anyone's guess, but the belief persisted in certain regions. You smile faintly in the dark, imagining the comfort of believing thirst could be fooled. Your lips feel better now, less tight. You run your tongue along them, then settle back into stillness. The dugout breathes slowly. Outside, the storm continues, but its urgency has faded into background sound. You rest one hand over your chest, feeling the container beneath layers. It is a quiet reassurance. You will not wake to ice inside your mouth. You have planned for this. With thirst eased, another barrier falls away. Your body no longer scans for missing pieces. Shelter, warmth, food, water. Each need has been met enough. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. You let your eyes remain closed, thoughts thinning out. The night stretches ahead, but it no longer feels like an opponent. It feels like something to pass through, gently, one careful breath at a time, supported by earth fabric and a small pocket of water held close. Warmth becomes a question again as time passes, not because the dugout fails, but because your body settles into stillness. Heat comes from movement, and when movement slows, warmth must be managed differently. This is where fire once tempted people most. Even a small flame promises comfort. Even a brief glow suggests control over the cold. In a dugout, though, fire is never simple. You consider it briefly, the idea of coaxing a tiny flame back to life. People did it. Small lamps, bits of glowing charcoal, even heated stones carried in from outside were used to raise the temperature just enough to take the edge off. Winter camp notes from soldiers and travellers describe fires no bigger than a fist, guarded closely extinguished the moment drowsiness deepened. Fire helped, but it demanded respect. You decide against open flame now. The air feels clean, the roof is low, the risk outweighs the benefit. Many learned this lesson through fear rather than instruction. Smoke behaves unpredictably in confined spaces, especially when weather shifts alter pressure outside. What clears easily 1 hour can linger dangerously the next. Instead, you focus on conserving what warmth you have. You adjust your posture again, drawing knees slightly closer, reducing exposed surface area. This position appears again and again in descriptions of winter. Rest instinctive and efficient. Curling inward protects the core where heat matters most. Some people relied on heated objects rather than fire itself. Stones warmed near a blaze, then wrapped in cloth, and brought into the shelter were a common solution in places where fuel was plentiful. In more barren regions, this was a luxury. You imagine the weight of such a stone, the steady release of warmth, and then let the thought go. Tonight the earth itself is your heat sink. You tuck your chin lower and pull fabric tighter around your shoulders. Each small adjustment seals another leak. Dugout life sharpened awareness of the body's edges. You learned exactly where cold crept in first, exactly how to block it. That knowledge was personal, learned through sensation rather than instruction. There is a faint warmth now where your back meets the wall. Not heat, but neutrality. The wall no longer steals warmth aggressively. It holds steady content to match your temperature rather than fight it. This is why Earth worked so well. It did not chase extremes. You listened for any hint of smoke or stale air. Nothing, just the clean scent of soil and fabric. You breathe deeply once, then let your breath slow again. Without fire, oxygen is not threatened. You can rest without vigilance in this regard, and that freedom matters. Some later accounts romanticized fires in winter shelters, describing flickering light and shared stories. Those moments existed, but they were often outside the dugout, not within it. Inside, restraint ruled. Survival favored caution over comfort. This difference sometimes surprises modern readers, but it reflects priorities shaped by risk. You rub your hands together briefly, generating a small burst of heat, then tuck them back under layers. This simple trick appears in countless winter recollections. Friction breath, patience. These were the tools available. The storm shifts slightly above wind-changing pitch. You register it distantly, then let it pass. Inside, the temperature remains stable. The dugout does not respond dramatically to outside changes. That insulation brings peace of mind. Your thoughts slow further now, unburdened by decisions about flame or fuel. You have chosen stillness over intervention. The dugout supports that choice. It holds warmth quietly without demand. As minutes pass, your body finds a narrow equilibrium. Not warm enough to sweat, not cold enough to shiver. This balance is fragile but real. You protect it by remaining calm, by not chasing comfort beyond what is safe. In this steady state, drowsiness deepens. The absence of fire means darkness remains complete, but you no longer need light. Your body understands the space. The dugout has become an extension of you, responding slowly, predictably. You breathe in, breathe out, and let the rhythm carry you. The night continues above, but inside warmth has been negotiated and accepted. You drift closer to sleep, held by earth and restraint rather than flame. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It circles, testing, pulling back, then edging closer again. You hover in that half-awake space where thoughts loosen and senses stay alert. In a dugout, this state is familiar. It is where caution lives. Fire is gone, food is settled, but air remains something you respect. You listen not just for sound now, but for how the air feels against your skin. Your chest rises and falls slowly. The air feels light enough, cool, but not heavy. You turn your head slightly and inhale again, checking without panic. People who slept in enclosed winter shelters developed this habit early. It was not fear-driven. It was maintenance, like brushing frost from a wall or adjusting bedding. Air could change without warning if snow drifted over an opening or wind direction shifted. You recall reading or hearing that in the past some families lost members not to cold but to bad air. Stories passed quietly, often without detail, as warnings rather than explanations. Later retelling sometimes exaggerated the danger, but the underlying lesson remained. In small spaces, air mattered as much as heat. You sit up just enough to feel the air near the entrance with your cheek. There is movement. Faint, steady, reassuring. You settle back again. This small check costs little energy and buys peace of mind. Dugout sleepers often performed it without fully waking a reflex learned over many nights. Your breath fogs briefly, then clears. No sharp smell, no pressure behind the eyes. These were signs people watched for even if they could not name the chemistry behind them. Experience taught them what safe air felt like. Tonight, it feels right. You let your shoulders sink into the wall again. The earth supports your back evenly. Outside, the storm continues its work, but the sound remains consistent. Consistency is comforting. Sudden change would wake you fully. For now, there is none. You remember that some winter travellers place small animals near shelter entrances to gauge air quality, watching for changes in behaviour. It sounds extreme now, but in a time before instruments, people relied on observation. Whether this practice was common or rare is difficult to say. Accounts vary, and some may be coloured by later imagination. Still, it speaks to how seriously people took the invisible risks of sheltering underground. You breathe slowly, deliberately, then allow the rhythm to become automatic again. The dugout seems to breathe with you, exchanging air at its own patient pace. Snow filters rather than blocks. The entrance curves guide flow gently. Everything works together quietly. A brief wave of drowsiness pulls you under, then releases you. You surface again, checking your surroundings without opening your eyes. The bedding is dry. The wall is cool but not wet. The roof is silent. These signals tell you it is safe to let go a little more. You shift your jaw, relaxing it, and feel tension release along your neck. Jaw clenching is common in cold, a subtle response to discomfort. Letting it go frees the breath further. You exhale slowly and feel your chest settle. The air carries faint traces of earlier smells. Earth wool, a memory of food. None are sharp, none overwhelm. In winter shelters, strong smells could indicate trouble, smoke, decay, stagnant air. Mildness is good. Neutrality is better. You imagine others long ago lying in similar spaces, making the same checks, learning the same patience. They didn't have words for oxygen or carbon buildup, but they knew when a space felt wrong. They trusted that instinct. It saved lives more often than written advice ever could. Your breathing deepens again. The pause between breaths lengthens. This is where sleep begins to take hold. The mind loosens its grip, confident enough to drift. A stronger gust passes overhead, shaking snow loose. The sound deepens briefly, then returns to baseline. You register it distantly. The air inside does not change. That tells you the entrance remains clear enough. You do not move. You feel a slight chill at your cheek and adjust your collar, turning your head a fraction away from the opening. This redirects airflow without blocking it. Small adjustments like this become second nature. You make them half asleep, guided by sensation rather than thought. Your eyelids feel heavy now. Thoughts fragment into images rather than sentences. You let them come and go without following. The dugout holds steady. The air remains kind. In this careful balance between enclosure and exchange between stillness and breath, you finally allow sleep to deepen. Not complete surrender, but enough. Enough to rest. Enough to recover. You drift, knowing that if something changes, your body will wake you. Until then, the air remains clean, the space remains safe, and the night moves on quietly above you. You wake without fully waking the way the body does when it has learned not to trust the night completely. There is no alarm in it, just a gentle surfacing. Your eyes stay closed, your breathing stays slow. Somewhere inside, a quiet checklist runs itself. Warmth first. You notice it in pieces. Chest steady, thighs insulated, feet cool but not aching. Good enough. Then air. You inhale, pause, exhale. Nothing feels thick or wrong. The dugout breathes as it did before. Sound comes next. The storm is still there but distant, unchanged. No sudden silence. No sharp crack. This half-awake routine was common in winter sheltering. People rarely slept straight through blizzard nights. They drifted in and out, checking conditions without sitting up, without speaking. Rest came in layers, just like everything else. You shift slightly, redistributing weight so no single spot bears pressure too long. Staying still conserves heat, but too much stillness invites stiffness and numbness. Dugout sleepers learn to move just enough, rolling a shoulder, bending a knee, pressing toes together. These movements were small, almost invisible, but they mattered. Your hand brushes the wall beside you, fingers grazing cool earth. The surface feels dry. That tells you moisture is under control. You rub once, then withdraw your hand, tucking it back into warmth. This simple check becomes part of the rhythm of the night. Some people kept quiet routines they followed every time they woke like this. touch the wall, flex the feet, listen for wind, then let go again. Others had no conscious system at all, relying instead on a sense that everything was as it should be. Memory of these routines varies widely in later accounts, but the pattern itself appears often. You rest your palm on your chest, feeling the slow rise and fall beneath the layers. Clothing shifts softly. The sound is familiar now, almost comforting. You do not need to adjust it. Everything sits where it should. Outside, the wind changes pitch, briefly rising, then settling back. You register it without tension. The roof does not respond. No creak, no settling. That tells you weight distribution remains even. Snow has not drifted dangerously. You let your jaw unclench again. Cold encourages tightness, especially when half asleep. You release it consciously, letting the tongue rest comfortably. Breath deepens a fraction more. In some winter diaries, people describe this kind of waking as a conversation with the shelter, a mutual checking in. The dugout holds, the body listens, then both return to quiet. It is not poetic in the moment, it is practical. But looking back, many remembered it with surprising tenderness. You adjust your head slightly, finding a position where the wall supports your neck without pressing too hard. Muscles soften. The bedding rustles faintly, then stills. The straw holds its shape. A thought drifts through disconnected and brief. Morning will come eventually. Storms end. Snow settles. People dug themselves out and went on. This knowledge does not energize you. It soothes you. There's no need to solve tomorrow tonight. You sink again, deeper this time. Sleep thickens, less fragile. The dugout feels smaller, closer, like a cupped hand. The world beyond narrows to breath and warmth and muffled sound. Another wake will come later, you know that, without thinking it. But for now the routines have been satisfied. Nothing demands action. The night holds steady. You drift back under trusting the patterns you have learned. The dugout remains patient. The storm continues above spending its strength. Inside rest resumes quiet and layered, carrying you gently forward through the long hours until the next soft waking arrives. When you surface again, it is not darkness that greets you, but a strange uncertainty about how long you have been there. Time has loosened its grip. Without a clock, without light hours, stretch and compress until they lose meaning. In winter, dugouts' time was measured differently. Hunger stiffness changes in sound. These became the markers. You lie still, trying to sense whether this waking belongs to night or early morning. The storm sounds the same. That tells you little. Blizzards could last a day or more, their voice unchanging. People sheltering this way learned not to chase the clock. They waited for signs instead. You flex your fingers slowly, one by one. Sensation returns easily. Good. You roll your shoulders slightly and feel the bedding shift beneath you. No sharp pain, no numbness. That suggests you've not been still too long. These physical checks replace watches and calendars. In the 19th century, many people owned clocks but rarely relied on them during storms. Cold affected mechanisms. Darkness made reading faces difficult. More importantly, exact time mattered less than condition. Could you move? Could you eat? Could you see? These questions guided action. You listen again. The wind has softened just a little, not stopped but lost some of its edge. Snow still slides across the roof, but the rhythm has slowed. This could mean the storm is easing or simply shifting. Accounts from long winters show how often people misread these signs, mistaking lulls for endings. Patience saved them from stepping out too soon. You touch the wall again and feel faint warmth where your body has rested. Earth remembers contact. It releases heat slowly like a delayed echo. This subtle feedback reassures you that the dugout has been doing its job for some time now. A thought drifts in about how people once marked time by prayer or song during long nights. Repeating familiar words gave shape to hours that otherwise blurred together. Whether this practice shortened the night or simply made it bearable is open to interpretation, but many clung to it. You do not pray now, you breathe. The effect is similar. You shift onto your other side, redistributing pressure. The movement sends a small puff of frost from the wall. It falls silently. You brush it away without urgency. This has become normal. The dugout responds predictably. You feel for the water container near your chest. Still liquid. That tells you the temperature has not dropped further. A small but useful measure. In winter shelters, people tracked change by such details. Ice forming faster, breath frosting more heavily, sound sharpening. None of those are happening now. Your stomach feels neutral, not hungry. That suggests some time has passed since you last ate, but not too much. Hunger would announce itself clearly if hours had slipped by. You accept this estimate and let the question go. Some later writers claimed people in dugouts lost all sense of time and became disoriented. Others described the opposite, a heightened awareness of natural rhythms. The truth seems to land somewhere in between. You are not lost, you are simply unhurried. You listen for birds, for any hint of morning life. There is none. Wind and snow still dominate. It is still night or something close to it. You adjust your expectations accordingly. There is no rush to rise. You tuck your hands back into warmth and let your breathing slow again. Time here is something you float in rather than track. Each waking check has served its purpose. Nothing needs doing. You allow yourself to sink back down, not worrying about when you will wake next. The dugout does not care about hours. It cares about balance. So do you. Wrapped in earth and fabric, listening to the softened storm, you drift once more into sleep, letting time pass however it chooses. You wake again to the awareness of another presence. Not a sound exactly, more a shift in warmth and space. Bodies change the air around them, and in close quarters that change is noticeable. If you're not alone, you feel it immediately. Dugouts were often shared not by choice but by necessity. Warmth multiplied when people clustered together and storms made privacy a luxury few could afford. You become aware of breathing that is not yours, slower, softer, rising and falling nearby. It blends with your own, until it is hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. The space feels fuller now, but also warmer. This trade-off was well understood. People learn to negotiate closeness in winter the way sailors learn to share bunks. Comfort came second to survival. You adjust your position, slightly careful not to disturb the balance. A small shift can send cold air into places it does not belong. You tuck your knees in, angling your body so heat stays pulled between you. In dugouts that housed families or group sleeping arrangements followed unwritten rules. Elders and children stayed closest to the warmest spots. Stronger adults took edges where cold crept in first. The smell of another person reaches you faintly. Woolskin smoke from days ago is not unpleasant. It is human. In confined shelters, scent became a kind of language. Sharp smells meant trouble. Familiar ones meant safety. People rarely commented on this directly, but letters hint at how much reassurance came from knowing someone else was near. You hear a small movement beside you, fabric rustling, a quiet cough quickly stifled. You do not react. Noise happens. A dugout is never perfectly still when shared. Over time, people learned which sounds mattered and which could be ignored. Panic spreads faster than cold if allowed. You feel warmth radiating through layers not just from your own body now. It changes how the dugout feels. The walls seem closer but less severe. Body heat softens edges. This is why sharing space mattered so much during blizzards. Even animals crowded together for the same reason. People were no different. Some winter recollections mention how tempers shortened in tight shelters, how small annoyances felt larger when movement was limited. Others describe the opposite, a strange calm that settled when everyone understood the stakes. Which experience dominated likely depended on hunger, exhaustion, and familiarity. Tonight there is no conflict, just quiet coordination. You become aware of synchronized breathing. It happens naturally when people rest close together. One breath sets a pace. Others follow. The effect is subtle but powerful. It steadies the nervous system, lowers tension. You feel it happening now without effort. You shift your shoulder slightly and feel a gentle resistance, another body responding in kind. Neither of you wake fully. This is the choreography of shared sleep. Move without waking. Adjust without stealing warmth. It was learned through repetition through nights like this. In larger dugouts, people sometimes arrange themselves in arcs or rows, maximizing shared heat. In emergency shelters, positions changed through the night as people woke and swapped places. Everyone took a turn near the cold edge. Fairness mattered. Memory of these arrangements varies, but the principle appears often. Warmth was a shared resource. You rest your hand against your chest again and feel your breath steady. The air feels slightly warmer now, thicker with human presence, but still clean. You listen for changes. None come. The entrance continues to breathe gently. The roof holds. You let yourself relax further, trusting the quiet cooperation around you. There is comfort in not being the only one listening, the only one responsible. Shared vigilance lightens the load even when unspoken. Your thoughts soften again, drifting without shape. The dugout feels less like a shelter and more like a living thing, responsive to the people inside it. Heat circulates, sound dampens, movement slows. You settle into this shared stillness, allowing sleep to deepen once more. Bodies nearby provide warmth and reassurance. The storm remains outside, persistent but distant. Inside, the night continues in quiet partnership, carrying all of you forward together until morning begins to announce itself in subtle ways. Your chest tightens slightly as a cough stirs somewhere deep, not violent, just persistent enough to be noticed. Cold does that. It creeps into lungs, quietly turning breath rough around the edges. You swallow once and breathe through your nose, hoping the irritation fades. In winter, shelter's illness was not dramatic at first. It arrived as small discomforts that demanded attention before they grew. You press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and feel the dryness there. Earlier water helped, but air this cold still steals moisture. You shift your head a little, angling your face away from the entrance so breath warms the air around you. This adjustment is instinctive now. The body learns quickly when conditions repeat. People who lived through long winters often carried small remedies with them, not because they always worked, but because doing something felt better than doing nothing. A scrap of dried mint tucked into a pocket, a clove held between teeth, a smear of animal fat rubbed along the chest. These gestures appear again and again in personal accounts, half remembered and unevenly described, but always tied to comfort as much as cure. You reach into a fold of clothing and find a small piece of cloth dampened earlier with water. You press it lightly against your lips and inhale slowly through it. The air feels softer that way. Whether it truly helps your throat or simply distracts the mind hardly matters. The cough eases. You listen for breathing nearby. It remains steady. No one else seems troubled. That reassures you. In shared shelters, illness spread easily, and people watched each other closely for signs of weakness. A single cough could draw concern. Tonight, this one passes quietly. You rub warmth back into your hands and then place one palm against your chest, feeling the heat there. It steadies you. Your breathing smooths out again. The dugout holds its temperature well enough that chills do not deepen. Some winter diaries mention people waking to rub limbs with snow if circulation felt sluggish. It sounds harsh, but the sharp cold stimulated blood flow when numbness threatened. You do not need that now. Sensation remains clear. You choose gentler methods. Your mind drifts briefly to the fear people carried about sickness in winter. With travel cut off and help distant, even minor illness felt dangerous. This awareness shaped behavior. People rested when they could. They avoided unnecessary exposure. They paid attention to early signs. You do the same now without naming it. You shift again, settling into a position that supports your chest without compressing it. The wall feels cool but not punishing. The bedding beneath you remains dry. These details matter. Dampness would worsen a cough. Dryness keeps it manageable. Your breath evens out. The irritation fades into the background. You make a mental note to drink again later if needed, then release the thought. No need to plan too far ahead. The night unfolds in small segments. You hear a soft sniffle nearby, someone else adjusting in sleep. Shared space means shared vulnerabilities, but also shared warmth. The air feels slightly warmer now, thicker with breath, but still moving. That balance keeps lungs from tightening further. You relax your shoulders and let the last tension drain away. The cough does not return. Your body has adjusted, found equilibrium again. These small corrections add up. They allow rest to continue. You sink back into the half-dream state where images flicker without meaning. The dugout remains quiet. Illness has been held at bay for now, managed with attention and patience rather than force. Wrapped in layers and earth breathing steady once more, you drift deeper into sleep, trusting that your body will wake you again if it needs to, and that until then, rest is the best medicine available. Sleep loosens its grip just enough for images to surface. They do not arrive in order or logic. They drift in, shaped by cold, by darkness, by the steady pressure of the earth around you. Dreams in places like this feel heavier, slower, as if the mind has to push through layers to move at all. You dream of walking, but not forward. Downward. Each step sinks slightly, like walking through deep snow that never quite reaches your knees. The sensation is familiar, echoing the work you did earlier, carving space, pressing walls. The dugout seeps into your dreams without asking permission. People who slept underground during long winters often remarked on how vivid their dreams became. Whether this came from exhaustion, limited light, or the muffled soundscape is hard to untangle. What is clear is that many remembered their dreams more sharply after nights like this. The mind had fewer distractions. It turned inward. A flicker of unease passes through the dream. The roof feels closer than it should. You reach up and your hand meets earth sooner than expected. Your heart stutters, then steadies. Even in sleep, your body remembers the roof held earlier. The fear dissolves before it fully forms. Some people believed that sleeping close to the ground brought dreams of ancestors or spirits, especially during storms when the world above felt distant. These beliefs varied by place and family. You do not dwell on them now, but fragments surface anyway. Old stories heard long ago, half forgotten until the mind goes quiet enough to retrieve them. You shift slightly in the dugout and the dream changes. Now you are warm-wrapped, listening to a storm from far away. The sound is comforting rather than threatening. This mirrors your waking state so closely that the boundary blurs. You're not sure whether you're dreaming of safety or experiencing it. A distant howl slips into the dream, stretched and hollow. Wolves maybe, or just wind reshaping itself into something recognizable. In winter, people often mistook sound for animals, especially when half asleep. The mind reaches for familiar explanations when senses are limited. The howl fades without consequence. You breathe deeply in the dream, and the act pulls you closer to waking. For a moment you hover between worlds. In this space, old superstitions once thrived. Some believed that waking suddenly in the night meant a storm was turning. Others thought it was a sign to check the shelter. Memories of these beliefs linger in the edges of your thoughts, even if you no longer subscribe to them. Your eyes remain closed. You choose not to wake fully. Nothing feels wrong. The dugout remains steady. The dream softens, losing its sharpness like frost melting into dampness. You drift again, this time into something gentler. Images blur into sensations rather than scenes. Warmth, weight, stillness. The earth presses evenly around you, not threatening, just present. The storm outside continues, but it no longer enters your dreams. It has been absorbed into the background part of the night rather than its focus. Your mind follows suit, letting go of vigilance in favor of rest. In this state, belief and reality mingle without conflict. The dugout becomes both shelter and symbol, holding you physically while your thoughts wander safely within its bounds. You sleep deeper now, carried by the quiet confidence that nothing demands your attention. The night moves on above you unseen. Below it, wrapped in earth and layered fabric, you rest dreams, fading into a steady calm that lasts longer than before. You wake with the sense that something is out there. Not a sound exactly, more a pressure on awareness, the feeling that the world beyond the dugout has not forgotten you. In the dark, imagination stretches easily, filling gaps left by limited sight and muffled noise. Nights like this invite thoughts of what moves unseen across snow. You listen carefully. Wind slides over the roof in long sheets, snow whispers against packed earth. Beneath that, nothing distinct, no footfalls, no scraping. Still, your mind offers possibilities. Wolves were common in many cold regions during the 1800s, their range is broader than today. People heard them often in winter, their calls carrying far over frozen ground. Even when they posed little real danger to sheltered humans, the sound alone could raise hair along the neck. You picture shapes moving beyond the entrance, dark against darker night. The image comes unbidden, then fades as you breathe. Dugout sleepers learned quickly that fear wasted warmth. Panic tightened muscles, sped, breath burned energy. The trick was not to banish fear entirely, but to acknowledge it without feeding it. You tilt your head, focusing on the ground beyond the wall rather than the air. Earth transmits vibration well. A heavy step nearby would announce itself as a faint tremor. You feel nothing. The ground remains quiet, steady. Stories passed down from winter nights often included animals sniffing at shelters, curious about human scent. Some of those stories were surely true, others grew larger with each retelling. In the moment, the distinction mattered less than the response. Stay still. Listen. Do not rush outside. You hear a sudden thump above, sharper than the wind. Your body tenses, then waits. A heartbeat passes, then another. The sound does not repeat. Likely a chunk of snow sliding free, hitting the roof before breaking apart. You relax again. Snow does that. It moves in its own time. You adjust your collar slightly, turning your face away from the entrance. This small movement shields skin without blocking airflow. It also shifts your line of listening. Sometimes changing position clarifies sound, separating imagination from reality. Beyond animals, other dangers occupied winter mines, roof collapse, entrance burial, sudden temperature drops. People learn to assess these risks constantly, even while resting. You picture the roof above you, layered and packed weight spread evenly. It has held through hours of storm already. That matters. You imagine snow drifting higher at the entrance, slowly sealing it. This fear appears often in winter recollections, especially among those new to Earth shelters. In practice, entrances rarely sealed completely without warning. Airflow changed first. Sound shifted. You listen again. The faint whistle remains. Snow has not closed you in. Your breathing slows as logic replaces imagery. The dugout has given you information all night. It continues to do so now. Nothing has changed abruptly. That consistency is your reassurance. A different thought intrudes, quieter but persistent. Silence. Total silence would worry you more than noise. Silence could mean snow packed so tightly that air movement stopped. You focus on sound again. Wind still murmurs. Snow still moves. The world is active. In some winter camps, people kept tools within reach at night, a shovel or stick, ready to clear entrances quickly if needed. You imagine one nearby, its presence comforting, even if you do not touch it. Preparedness calms the mind. Your thoughts wander briefly to accounts of people misjudging safety, stepping out too early, losing direction in whiteout conditions. Those stories were told as cautionary reminders. You're not tempted to leave now. There's nowhere to go. Shelter remains the right choice. You shift slightly and feel the wall press against your shoulder, solid, reliable. Earth does not move easily. That steadiness anchors you, pulling attention back from imagined threats. Outside, the wind lifts again stronger for a moment, then settles. The roof absorbs the force. No debris falls inside, no new cracks form. The structure holds. You let your mind play through the possibilities one last time, then consciously set them aside. This mental sweep, checking each risk and dismissing it, is another routine learned through repetition. Once done, rest can resume. Your body softens again. Muscles release. Breath deepens. The imagined shapes retreat back into the dark where they belong. The dugout feels smaller now, enclosing you fully, leaving little room for what lies beyond. In winter shelters, people often said the outside world shrank at night, reduced to sound and memory. Inside, life continued quietly. You feel that now. The storm exists, but it does not intrude. You settle back into stillness, trusting the cues you have learned to read. If something real approaches, sound or vibration will tell you. Until then, imagination has done its work and can rest. The night moves on. Outside, dangers remain outside. Inside, wrapped in earth and patience, you allow sleep to deepen once more, confident that the dugout stands between you and whatever roams the blizzard beyond. You wake to a silence that feels different, thicker somehow, like the world has been wrapped in cloth. For a moment, the absence of sound startles you more than noise ever did. Your breath is the loudest thing you hear, soft and slow inside layers of wool and earth. You stay still, letting your senses sort themselves out. The dugout feels unchanged. The wall is cool against your shoulder. The bedding holds its shape. Nothing presses down from above. The silence is not collapse or danger. It is snow doing what snow does best, absorbing everything, smoothing edges, muting the world until even wind forgets how to shout. You listen longer. No hiss, no roar. Just the faintest whisper of air moving through the entrance, barely audible. This kind of quiet usually comes after the worst has passed. Not an ending exactly, but a pause. A breath held between effort and release. You flex your toes and feel them respond. A little stiff, but alive. You roll one shoulder, then the other, easing joints that have been still for hours. The movement sends a soft rustle through straw and fabric. It sounds too loud in the hush, and you smile faintly at the thought. The air feels colder now, but in a settled way, not biting. Cold that waits rather than attacks. This often followed heavy snowfall. Clouds hung low, trapping chill near the ground while everything else slept. You adjust your collar and tuck your chin, sealing in warmth again. You sit up slowly, careful not to dislodge anything overhead. The roof holds. No snow trickles down. That tells you weight is stabilized. Snow has finished shifting for now. The structure has found its balance. You lean forward slightly and peer toward the entrance. Light filters through, faintly not bright, just a dim grey suggestion. Dawn maybe, or simply snow reflecting itself. In storms like this morning arrived quietly without fanfare. No sunrise colours, just a gradual thinning of darkness. You breathe in deeply and notice how clean the air smells. Cold strips sent away, leaving only the most basic notes. Earth, wool, a trace of yourself. Nothing sharp, nothing stale. The dugout has weathered the night well. You reach out and brush the wall again, more out of habit than need. Dry, solid, reliable. You nod slightly as if acknowledging a companion that kept its word. Your stomach stirs faintly, not hunger, yet just awareness. Another sign that time has moved forward. The body knows even when the mind loses track. You listen again, this time for life. No birds, no distant movement. The world outside remains hushed, buried. This is the moment when many people felt tempted to emerge too soon, fooled by quiet, into thinking conditions were safe. Experience taught patience. Snow hid dangers well. You remain seated, letting warmth redistribute after sleep. Standing too quickly would steal heat and balance. You move your hands, rubbing them together briefly, then tucking them back into layers. Blood flows. Sensation sharpens. The dugout feels smaller now that you're upright, but also more familiar. You know its shape. You know where every surface sits. It no longer feels improvised. It feels earned. You lean back again and wait. There is no rush. Morning, if it is morning, will reveal itself fully in time. Snow does not melt on command. Storms do not apologize. Survival has taught you to move when conditions invite it, not when impatience demands it. For now, the quiet holds. The dugout holds. You sit wrapped in stillness, listening to nothing and everything, at once aware that you have crossed the worst part of the night. The blizzard has spent itself. What remains is recovery, slow and careful, one small movement at a time. You shift again, and feel the difference immediately. The air is heavier near the floor, cooler, pressing gently against your ankles. That tells you snow has settled deeper, outside ceiling gaps and lowering circulation just enough to notice. It is not dangerous yet, but it is a signal. Morning work begins long before stepping out. You reach for the tool you kept close, whatever served as a shovel through the night. A board edge, a pan, a length of wood. It is crude, but it does not need to be elegant. It needs to move snow. You ease toward the entrance, careful with each motion so you do not knock loose more than you intend. As you scrape at the packed drift inside the doorway, snow resists at first, then gives in slabs. The sound is dull and close, like breaking chalk underwater. You push the loosened snow behind you, letting it melt slightly against your clothing before brushing it away. Clearing inward is slow work, but safer than forcing your way out blindly. You pause often, checking breath, listening for shifts. The roof remains quiet, no settling, no groan. That tells you the structure has accepted the weight above it. Still, you keep movements controlled. Sudden jolts can break balances that held all night. You clear enough to feel air move more freely. A faint rush brushes your cheek. Good, you stop there for now. Overclearing invites collapse outside the entrance. Snow supports itself until disturbed. People learn to respect that fragile stability. You sit back on your bedding and rest your hands, warming them against your body. The effort has woken you fully now. Muscles feel stiff but responsive. This kind of morning labour was expected. Dugouts rarely emerged from storms unchanged. Roofs sagged, entrances filled, walls wept moisture. Repair was part of survival, not a sign of failure. You glance upward and brush a small patch of frost from the roof interior. It falls softly, harmless. Moisture management continues even now. Let it build and cold will follow. You keep the space dry where you can. Outside remains hidden, but you imagine the landscape transformed. Fences buried, paths erased, landmarks gone. People often described stepping out after storms into a world that felt newly made, familiar shapes softened into strange forms. That moment comes later. For now, the dugout is your world. You test the wall with your shoulder and feel no give. Packed earth holds. You smooth one section that loosens slightly during the night, pressing it back into place. The action feels familiar, almost comforting. Maintenance is grounding. It gives your hands something to do while the rest of the world waits. You clear a little more snow from the entrance, just enough to see light brighten. Not a view yet, but a promise of one. The air that enters feels colder than before, sharp and clean. You inhale carefully, then retreat back into warmth. People who rush this step sometimes paid for it with numb fingers or lost footing. Cold exposure after hours of stillness can shock the body. You take your time, letting circulation catch up gradually. You settle back again, listening. No movement above, no shifting weight. The roof remains stable. That is your cue to rest before the next effort. You wrap your arms around yourself and lean against the wall, breathing steadily. The dugout has done its job. Now it needs care, just like any shelter exposed to winter's force. Outside, the blizzard's work lies finished for now. Inside, you prepare for the slow return to the surface, knowing that survival did not end with the night. It continues in these careful repairs, these measured pauses, these small decisions that keep cold from reclaiming ground it already lost. You settle into a rhythm that feels older than you are shaped by necessity rather than choice. Inside a dugout work does not announce itself loudly. It simply appears waiting to be done. Tasks sort themselves out by urgency and by who is best suited to them. You notice this now even if you are alone in the space. Some jobs happen close to the ground, clearing the entrance, smoothing walls, managing bedding. These are careful tasks, slow and deliberate often, taken on by whoever is lightest or most patient. Other work requires strength, packing snow, shifting supports, bracing the roof if it sags. Those tasks call for heavier bodies, steadier shoulders. This division emerged naturally wherever people shared shelters, guided more by practicality than by strict rules. You imagine how this played out when families rode out storms together. Children stayed close to warmth, given small jobs that kept hands busy without risking exposure. Elders offered instruction rather than muscle, reminding others where to press, where to leave well enough alone. No one questioned these roles in the moment. Survival left little room for debate. You reach down and adjust the bedding again, fluffing straw where it has flattened. This kind of maintenance often fell to those who spent the most time inside. It mattered. Bedding lost its insulating power when compressed too long. Restoring loft was a quiet but essential task. You think of how dugouts became classrooms of a sort. Skills passed not through lectures but through watching and doing. A hand placed over yours to show pressure. A nod to signal enough. These lessons stayed with people long after storms ended. You brush frost from a low corner of the wall and smooth damp earth back into place. This repetitive motion steadies you. In shared shelters, these smaller tasks often went unnoticed, yet they shaped comfort and safety more than dramatic efforts ever did. Outside, labour waited, digging out paths, checking animals, restoring order to a buried landscape. Inside labour focused on preservation. Keep warmth. Keep air moving. Keep space livable. Both mattered equally, but inside work came first, especially when bodies were still stiff from the night. You pause and listen again. The quiet remains. Light at the entrance brightens slightly. Morning has settled in, though it still hides behind cloud and snow. There is no rush. The dugout continues to protect you while strength returns. You rub warmth back into your hands and flex your fingers. They respond more easily now. Circulation improves with movement and time. This gradual return of sensation guided many decisions in winter. People learned to wait until hands worked properly before taking on harder tasks. Rushing led to mistakes. You consider stepping outside, then decide to wait a little longer. The dugout is still warm. Leaving it too soon would waste that stored heat. Better to use it fully before facing the open cold. You sit back against the wall and breathe. The space feels balanced again. Repairs are done for now. The shelter has recovered from the night's strain. In these moments, people often reflected on how much of winter survival happened unseen. Not in dramatic rescues or daring journeys, but in quiet upkeep, patient division of effort and respect for limits. You feel that truth now, wrapped in earth and stillness, preparing to rise when the time feels right. You notice the way the space changes when you imagine smaller bodies inside it. The dugout would feel tighter, then warmer perhaps, but more fragile. Children and elders altered everything about shelter life. Their needs slowed movements, softened voices, and shifted priorities without anyone having to say so out loud. You picture a child curled into the warmest pocket, wrapped deeper than anyone else at pulled low, until only breath showed. Nights like this taught stillness early. Children learned to stay quiet, not from discipline, but from watching. Noise meant cold air rushing in. Sudden movement meant upset balance. They absorbed these lessons quickly, their bodies adapting faster than their memories would later admit. Elders brought a different presence, less movement, more observation. They noticed drafts before others did, felt changes in air and pressure through joints that had weathered many winters. A hand raised slightly could stop unnecessary work. A murmur could suggest waiting rather than acting. Experience spoke softly but carried weight. You imagine the careful way bedding would be arranged, then thicker beneath the most vulnerable edges given to those who could tolerate chill longer. No arguments, no explanations. It was understood. Warmth flowed toward need. Food portions shifted too. Smaller bites saved for those who struggled to keep heat. Broth if there was any. Fat skimmed and shared. Eating became quieter, slower, almost ceremonial in tight shelters. Every mouthful counted not just for hunger but for morale. You feel the dugout differently now, as if it remembers these arrangements. The way the walls curve inward, the way the floor slopes gently. It feels designed to cradle even if it was shaped in haste. Spaces like this learned their occupants over time. You adjust a fold of bedding near where a child might rest, smoothing it flat even though no one lies there now. The motion feels instinctive. Care lingers in places where it was once needed. Sleep in shared dugouts rarely followed adult patterns alone. Children stirred more often, dreams spilling into soft whimpers. Elders woke early, listening before light arrived. The night stretched around these rhythms, accommodating them without complaint. You think about how stories were told in places like this, whispered and brief, meant to soothe rather than entertain. Familiar tales repeated night after night, until they lost edges and became comfort more than narrative. Memory softened in the telling. You sit quietly, letting that imagined presence fade, leaving the dugout feeling both emptier and fuller for it. The night has moved on. Morning waits beyond the snow. The shelter remains what it always was, a place shaped by whoever needed it most. You breathe steadily and rest again, aware that survival was never just about strength or cleverness. It was about patience, attention, and making room for those who needed warmth the most. You begin to sense how this dugout belongs to a much wider family of shelters, each shaped by land and weather rather than by any single plan. Even without leaving, you can feel it. The earth here behaves a certain way. It packs tightly. It holds cold evenly. In other places, the night would have unfolded differently. You imagine soil that crumbles instead of compressing, forcing walls to slope more gently. In sandy ground, dugouts had to be wider, shallower, more careful. In clay, they could be cut sharper. Walls smoothed almost like pottery. People learned these differences by touch. The first strike of a tool told you what kind of shelter the land would allow. You think of open plains where wind never rests. The dugouts hugged the ground even more closely, entrances kept low and angled roofs piled thick with sod. In wooded regions, shelters rose slightly higher, borrowing strength from roots and fallen timber. Each environment shaped its version of the same idea, adapting quietly without announcement. Cold itself varied. Dry cold bit sharply and preserved. Wet cold crept and soaked. In damp regions, dugouts needed constant attention to moisture, walls brushed often, bedding changed whenever possible. In drier climates, frost decorated walls but rarely turned to drip. People adjusted without naming the differences. They simply responded. You feel grateful for the way this ground behaves, for how it held through the night without slumping or weeping. You imagine how much harder the same storm would have been in softer soil, how often repairs would interrupt rest. Shelter was never one size fits all. It was always a conversation with place. You picture mountains where snow stacked deeply, pressing down for months at a time. Dugouts there became almost permanent, reinforced again and again until they blurred into the hillside. In flatter lands, they were more temporary, reshaped each season as storms demanded. Even the sound of the storm changed by region. Wind over open grass sang differently than wind through trees or across stone. Inside dugouts, people learned those voices, recognizing where they were without seeing anything at all. Sound became geography. You adjust your posture and feel how the wall curves to meet your back. This curve would feel different elsewhere. Sharper, softer. The dugout carries the fingerprint of its location in every surface. You think about how knowledge travelled then. Someone passing through noticed how another group built lower entrances, thicker roofs, deeper floors. They remembered. Next storm they tried it. Over time, practices spread without maps or manuals, carried by memory and necessity. You rest your hand against the wall and feel the faint warmth still lingering. This ground has done its job. In another place, another dugout, the night might have been louder, wetter, harsher. Here it was manageable. The thought brings a quiet respect for the land itself. Not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. Shelter works best when it listens to where it is built. You listened. The dugout answered. You breathe in slowly and let the thought drift away. Morning will come, and no matter where you are. For now you remain wrapped in a version of the earth that agreed to hold you through the storm, shaped by its own rules and rhythms, carrying you gently toward the rest of the day. You sit quietly and notice how memory starts to rearrange the night almost immediately. What felt sharp hours ago now seems softer, smoothed by survival. The cold was intense, yes, but it did not defeat you. The fear was real, but it did not take over. In moments like this, people often reshape their own experiences without meaning to, sanding down edges, so they could carry them forward. You imagine how nights like this were later described sometimes as brutal trials, sometimes as manageable inconveniences. The truth likely lived somewhere in the middle, shifting depending on who was speaking and how much time had passed. Memory is not fixed. It warms certain moments and freezes others. You feel it happening now. The sound of the storm, once overwhelming, has faded into background noise in your recollection. The discomfort of the ground feels less severe. What remains strongest is the sense of being held, of having figured something out in time. Survival edits the story. You think of how people spoke about dugouts years later, telling younger listeners what they were like. Some emphasized hardship, warning of danger and sacrifice. Others spoke almost fondly, recalling warmth, closeness, and quiet nights like this one. Neither version was false, they were simply incomplete on their own. You shift slightly and feel the dugout respond the same way it has all morning, steady and unchanged. That consistency anchors memory. It gives your mind something solid to attach to as it sorts through the experience. You consider how quickly expectations adjust. What once seemed unbearable becomes baseline. What once frightened becomes routine. Dugout life taught this lesson well. People adapted faster than they expected, not because conditions improved, but because perception did. You imagine someone describing this night to another years from now, struggling to explain the silence after the storm, the way earth smelled, the way time stretched. Words would fail in places. Listeners would nod without fully understanding. That gap between experience and explanation would remain. You realize that some details will stick sharply. The sound of snow sliding, the feel of packed earth against your shoulder, the way breath fogged and cleared. Other details will blur completely. That is how memory protects itself. You rest your head back against the wall and let these thoughts drift. There's no need to resolve them. The night has already done its work. The dugout has already proven itself. You feel a faint warmth where your body still touches the earth, a delayed echo of shared heat. That sensation will likely linger in memory longer than the cold ever could. Comfort leaves deeper impressions than discomfort once danger has passed. You breathe slowly and allow the story of the night to settle into whatever shape it chooses. Not polished, not dramatic, just real enough to be carried forward. The dugout remains quiet around you, unchanged by memory or meaning. It exists only in the present. You take one more calm breath and let the night become part of you, ready to fade into recollection as morning draws closer. You feel the night loosening its hold, not all at once, but in small allowances. The air feels a touch lighter. Your body responds before your thoughts do, easing stiffness, with a subtle stretch that stays contained within the dugout. Nothing cracks or protests. It is the kind of stretch that happens naturally after long stillness, careful and patient. You draw one knee in, then the other, and feel warmth shift inside layers. The bedding rustles softly beneath you, straw adjusting to new pressure. It has flattened some, but not enough to matter. The ground beneath remains firm and quiet. You trust it now in a way that would have seemed impossible hours earlier. Light at the entrance grows just perceptibly brighter. Not enough to see detail, just enough to suggest shape. Snow reflects light generously, spreading it evenly rather than letting it beam. The dugout fills with a pale glow that softens edges without revealing much. You blink slowly, letting your eyes adjust. You breathe in and notice the smell again. Earth, wool, cold air that has lost its sharpness. The night air carries no urgency now. It has done what it came to do. You feel no need to hurry it along. You shift to sit more upright and feel the wall support your back. It takes your weight easily, no crumble, no shift. The shelter feels settled, as if it has decided to remain exactly as it is for a while longer. Your hands move without instruction, brushing at your sleeves, smoothing fabric, checking where warmth gathers. These movements are slow and unthinking, guided by comfort rather than plan. You rub your palms together once, then tuck them back in. You listen again out of habit more than concern. The storm has retreated into distance. Wind moves somewhere far above, reshaped by terrain you cannot see. Snow no longer slides across the roof. It rests. You lean forward slightly and peer toward the entrance. The opening looks smaller now, framed by packed snow that has softened into rounded shapes. Nothing looks threatening. Nothing moves. The world outside feels paused. You sit with that stillness, letting your body come fully awake without rushing it. Blood warms fingers and toes gradually. Sensation sharpens, then steadies. The dull ache of cold has faded into something manageable, almost forgettable. You take a slow breath and release it, noticing how easily it leaves your chest. Breathing feels effortless now. The dugout has done its work well. You glance once more around the small space familiar now in every curve and surface. This place held you when you needed it. That knowledge settles quietly inside you. You rest again, not to sleep but to linger. The night has passed its hardest point. Morning will come when it is ready. For now you remain where you are, calm and steady, wrapped in earth, and light letting the last traces of darkness slip away on their own. You begin to feel the pull of movement again, not urgent, just inevitable. Staying still served you through the night, but now your body asks for change. Muscles want to work, joints want to straighten. The dugout feels smaller as awareness expands, not because it has shrunk, but because you are ready to leave it. You gather yourself, carefully mindful of how quickly cold can return when warmth is disturbed. You shift weight from one foot to the other, testing balance. The ground beneath you is firm, no slipping, no hidden voids. That is reassuring. You reach toward the entrance and clear a final layer of snow, pushing it inward first, then brushing it aside. Light spills in more fully now, a flat, pale brightness that fills the dugout evenly. It reveals no colour, only shape. Everything outside looks softened, rounded, as if the world has been redrawn overnight. Cold air slides in sharper than before, and you pause to let your body adjust. You breathe slowly, allowing the chill to touch skin without shocking it. This moment matters. Step out too fast and stiffness turns dangerous. You wait until your breath steadies again. You lean forward and look out. The landscape is almost unrecognizable. Familiar lines are buried. Depth is hard to judge. Snow smooths everything into quiet curves. Sound travels differently here. Even your own movements feel muffled. You take a step toward the entrance, then stop, glancing back once more. The dugout sits behind you, small and unassuming, already beginning to blend into the ground again. From a distance it would be nearly invisible. Just a slight disturbance in snow, easy to miss. You feel a brief reluctance to leave it. The dugout has been more than shelter. It has been a partner through the night. Leaving feels like breaking a pact, even though you know it is only temporary. You step out, carefully placing weight, slowly testing each patch of snow before committing. The cold greets you fully now, wrapping around legs and shoulders. It is sharp but clean, the kind of cold that wakes rather than threatens. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the brightness. The sky is a solid sheet of grey. No sun, no shadow, just light spread evenly across everything. It feels calm in a way the storm never did. You look back again at the dugout. Snow already begins to soften its edges, trying to reclaim it. In time it will disappear entirely, leaving no trace of the night spent inside. That thought feels oddly comforting. You turn away and begin to move forward, slow and deliberate. Each step presses a new mark into untouched snow. The world waits quietly, changed but intact. You carry the dugout with you now, not as a place, but as a memory of warmth, held through cold of patience, rewarded by morning. You move a little farther from the dugout and then stop, not because you must, but because the quiet invites it. Snow stretches out in every direction, smooth and unmarked, except for the path you just made. Each step feels deliberate, placed with care, as if the ground deserves respect after the night it carried you through. Cold settles around you again, but it feels different now. It no longer presses inward. It sits where it belongs, surrounding rather than invading. Your body knows the difference. Muscles respond without protest. Breath flows evenly. The tension that once lived in your shoulders has loosened. You look back one last time. The dugout is already fading into the landscape, its shape softened by light and snow. Soon it will be nothing more than a slight rise, then nothing at all. No marker will say what happened there. No sign will tell the story of the night spent inside it. And yet it mattered. You turn forward again and begin to walk slowly, carefully, letting your feet learn the surface. Snow compresses with a quiet sound beneath each step. The world feels newly made, fragile and calm, as if it is still deciding what comes next. Your thoughts drift without urgency now. The long night has emptied them of sharp edges. What remains is a gentle awareness of being present, of having passed through something demanding and come out intact. As you move, the rhythm of walking takes over. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The simplicity is soothing. The dugout recedes behind you, but its influence lingers, a memory of stillness and protection, carried forward into open space. You feel warmth still held in your layers, slowly releasing itself with each movement. The cold accepts this exchange without resistance. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels threatening. You slow again, letting your step shorten and stop altogether. There is no destination yet. Just this moment, balance between rest and motion, between night and day. You draw a deep breath, then let it out slowly. The air feels clean, the quiet feels earned. Now let that quiet follow you somewhere softer. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing stretch out. Imagine the snow smoothing every sharp thought the same way it smoothed the land. You are safe, you are warm enough, you are done working for now. Let the scene fade gently. The cold stays outside. The earth stays steady. Your body settles into calm. Sleep can come again if it wants to, or rest, or simply stillness. Either way, you do not need to do anything more. You're right, thank you for catching that. Here's the 300-word wind-down written to append seamlessly to the end of section 30 with slower pacing, softened language, and longer easing sentences. The world does not ask anything of you now. The night has loosened its grip, and the quiet that remains is gentle, unhurried, almost kind. Snow rests where it fell. The air holds still. Even your thoughts seem willing to lie down and be quiet for a while. You allow yourself to stop moving completely, not out of caution this time, but out of comfort. There is no need to measure warmth or listen for danger. The work has been done. The shelter held. The body endured. That knowledge settles into you like a final layer of insulation, soft and reassuring. Your breathing slows without effort. Each inhale feels smooth and complete. Each exhale long and unforced. The cold exists, but it stays where it belongs, outside your awareness, no longer demanding attention. Inside, there is only a steady calm, the kind that arrives after effort has passed and nothing urgent remains. You picture the dugout one last time, not as a place of survival now, but as a quiet pocket of earth that did its job and then faded back into the landscape. It does not need to be remembered sharply. It can soften, blur at the edges, become part of the ground again, just as the night itself fades into rest. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw loosens. The small tensions you carried without noticing finally release one by one as if they were waiting for permission. There is no rush to think, to plan, to prepare. Morning will arrive on its own. For now, you can rest in this moment, wrapped in stillness, supported by the simple fact that you are safe, you are warm enough, and nothing more is required of you. Let the quiet deepen. Let your breathing guide you gently downward. Let sleep arrive in its own time. Sweet dreams.